Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's meeting. Welcome to people within the gallery. If we could begin with the first item on the agenda, which is the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Please exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure your mobiles are turned off or set to silence. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies. Have we received any apologies, please?
Barry Longdon. Brown.
Thank you. All members are requested to turn on their microphones before speaking and speak clearly into the microphone in front of them, and remember to turn it off when they have finished speaking. A microphone will be provided for members of the public who have notified us they wish to speak. Agenda item 4, minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of July 2019. Who was it, sorry? Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you. The minutes on page 10. In relation to item 6, announcements, and note the following. Councillor Evans attempted to make a statement of retraction as requested to Councillor Evans in a letter from the portfolio holder for arts, the then portfolio holder for Arts and Leisure, dated the 20th of February 2019. You, Madam Mayor, vetoed the attempts by Councillor Evans to make such statements, despite convention that statements of retraction can be heard during announcements and as per officer advice. Thank you.
The point I made about the request from Councillor Evans to make a statement was that it is protocol to inform both officers and myself if you wish to make an announcement under this particular item. That is the ruling that I made. Carry on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a colleague that's willing to second, and therefore it would be required to be voted upon, Madam Mayor.
Would you please repeat your motion, Councillor Walmsley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and that is to amend the minutes as on page 10, under section 6, announcements, inserting the following. Councillor Evans attempted to make a statement of retraction as requested to Councillor Evans in a letter from the then portfolio holder for Arts and Leisure, dated 20th February 2019. The Mayor vetoed the attempts of Councillor Evans to make such statements, despite convention that statements of retraction can be heard during announcements. Thank you.
Vetoing his request, I simply told him he had not followed the protocol. But if you would, fine. Councillor Jackson.
A point of order, Madam Mayor. I believe the minutes are accurate. Know what the intention of Councillor Evans was when he stood up to speak. I don't think the words retraction were ever mentioned, but we are going on recollection, Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councillor Walmsley, I do not consider the point that you have raised to be a formal notice of motion, so I'm not prepared to accept the points that you're making.
As per our constitution, Madam Mayor, the minutes do require upon voting upon, and therefore I have suggested an amendment to said minutes, and therefore it is completely within the constitution for that to be put to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. If you insist, Councillor Walmsley, all those who are in favour of supporting the Go on.
To the amendment that Councillor Walmsley has presented. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Walmsley for presenting this amendment to the minutes. On a point of order, could you please turn your microphone off? You do this every single time, Madam Mayor.
To put up with any stupidity in this meeting about whether or not this is a notice of motion, a point of order, or what it is. I am now quite prepared to take a vote on whether the minutes are an accurate record of the last meeting. Has been proposed and seconded. Could I have those in show of hands? It is a... no, I'm not taking any more points of order. Please sit down. Please sit down. There is no recorded vote on a procedural motion, which is what this is. I said it's a procedural motion and we will not be having a recorded vote. It will be a show of hands. All those... no, sorry. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. Thank you. And all those in favour of the against the motion, please show. Motion has lost.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Could you just wait one moment, please? Point
4:15.5, Madam Mayor. I request my vote be recorded.
Your vote will be recorded, Councillor Walmsley. Yes.
On a point of order, Madam Mayor, name be recorded in the minutes for the most recent procedural motion.
Whether or not the minutes were correct or incorrect, Councillor... wish to raise anything? Yeah, I will do in a minute. I am currently waiting to take a vote on the minutes of the last meeting. I have no intention of taking any more points of order. All those in favour of the minutes of the previous meeting, please show. And all those against. Is one.
Section 4:15.5. I request my vote on that item be recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do not believe the minutes are accurate.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I would also like my vote to be recorded under the same article.
We move on to item 5, declarations of interest. We do have lists of the declarations of interest within these documents. Does anyone else have anything to declare other than that is written? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam. Has been notified but not printed in the agenda. I'm now a trustee of the Bulkington Sports and Social Club.
Declarations of interest. Sorry, Councillor, I didn't spot you.
I'm not and never have been a representative of the following outside bodies, the hospice charity, but I do work for a private healthcare company, BMI Healthcare. I'm also a school governor for Newdigate School, but none of these are down here. Thank you.
Agenda item 6. I have been informed that Councillor Andy Sargent wishes to make an announcement. Councillor Sargent.
To thank council officers and staff and residents of Attleborough for all the help that they've given towards the Attleborough Community Matters Group. The help's come in many ways, from advice, organising and helping to set up events, litter picks, turning up and supporting the events on the day as well. What we've actually achieved is creating footfall for the village, but the real achievement is tackling isolation. I've had many conversations with residents saying that they're looking forward to the event on the day, or the events on the day. It's getting people out, getting people talking, people are meeting up after, joining different groups. So it's been a real positive thing that's been happening. It's also creating a sense of belonging and ownership and pride in the village, because people are now actually coming out and cleaning it up and litter picking and taking a little bit more pride in what they're doing. We've got some exciting projects coming up, which is also creating a feel-good factor, because people are getting quite excited about stuff that we've got coming up. And being positive and talking positive is definitely paying off. Thank you for letting me speak. Thanks, then.
I have no further announcements, and I have no announcements of my own to make on this occasion. So we will move to item 7 on the agenda, which is the public questions. I've lost my list. No, I haven't. I've got it. Sorry. Moving then to the first speaker, which is Mrs. M. Condacor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We urgently need to plant more trees for climate change mitigation, help with reducing the flooding risk, improving air quality and providing habitats for increased biodiversity. However, it seems financial and staffing limitations have prevented the Borough Council from planting a significant number of trees in the last few years, not even replacing as many as have needed to be felled for safety reasons. There is massive public enthusiasm for planting trees, and many members of the public, including myself, would be happy to assist the Council in planting trees. Will the portfolio holder request that staff identify suitable sites for tree planting and invite the public to help plant trees on such sites? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you, Madam. Welcome the opportunity to work constructively with local communities, local community groups, whilst we have to take account of our financial position and responsibilities and what resources we have available. But I will ask, again, for our officers to investigate where appropriate support and development of tree planting schemes can be placed, and we'll get them to have a look at all the land in our ownership across the borough and identify areas where this can take place.
Lubbs, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your surname.
Just for record, it's Cvetkovic. Thank you. Like many other residents, I was pleased to hear the national government funding has been secured to help develop Nuneaton Town Centre. This was almost immediately followed by a sense of disappointment. The reason for my disappointment is that no funding has been bid for the other two settlements in the borough. Why have bids not been placed for the developments of Bedworth and Bulkington? The borough is becoming increasingly polarised in the way that MBBC treats its three settlements. Nuneaton is very much at the core and has dominated the council's plans for development and investment. Bedworth appears very much on the periphery with hardly any investment. A trip to the town centre on a Saturday afternoon with shops shutting before 3 p.m. confirms that this is becoming a ghost town. Then there is Bulkington, which isn't even included in the borough title. I know, perhaps a change of name to Nuneaton, Bedworth and Bulkington Borough Council might help the ruling Labour group remember that there is a third and forgotten settlement. It appears that Bulkington is very much forgotten and is lucky to receive financial crumbs from Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. What I would like to know is, putting aside any possible Section 106 money that may or may not be given to Bulkington or Bedworth or even Nuneaton, what investment and what projects are currently in place or planned for regeneration and improvement of Bedworth and Bulkington? I would also like to know what percentage of MBBC's budget over the last 5 years has been spent on redevelopment and improvement projects which directly benefit the residents of each of the borough's 3 major settlements. I hope that MBBC will sit up and start thinking beyond the development of Nuneaton and remember its own motto, united to achieve. At the moment, the borough is far from united. Division and discontent would perhaps be a more apt motto, which more appropriately reflects the feelings of residents of Bedworth and Bulkington who feel left out and often forgotten and unheard by the ruling body of this council.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks. Statement stroke question. The very recently announced Towns Fund, for which Nuneaton was one of 100 places invited to develop proposals, was not subject to any application process. However, I am clearly very pleased that Nuneaton was selected, along with other towns, to be able to bid for significant amounts of potential funding. In contrast, the Future High Streets Fund was an application process. However, the Round 1 scheme criteria only allowed each authority to make one submission, covering one town centre. As a lot of appropriate background work had already been completed as part of the Transforming Nuneaton programme, it was rightly considered that an application for Nuneaton Town Centre would stand a better chance of success in the first instance. However, it has always been my view, and I have stated this in public on previous occasions, that an application for Bedworth Town Centre will be submitted as part of the second round of applications that Government have indicated will open in 2020. This considered approach allows necessary strategic visioning work to be completed to support Bedworth. I am pleased to say this visioning work for Bedworth is currently in its final draft stages. Separately to this, projects are underway to support Bedworth Town Centre. Bedworth Market has been identified as a venue that has potential to become a key attractor for Bedworth Town Centre and to provide incubation space for start-up businesses. In the past 2 years, 2 businesses have started as market traders in Bedworth and moved on to lock-up units in the market and then on to town centre stores. All available lock-up units are let, and so we have recently added 2 further permanent cabins which were let immediately. Additionally, we have invested in making improvements cosmetically and operationally to Bedworth Market, replacing fixed stalls with pop-up stalls to provide more flexibility of layout and maximise revenue opportunities, introducing new events including craft fairs and the classic car show, and employing a dedicated Bedworth market officer. The Council has a wide-ranging programme of capital projects each year, but it is not possible to break this down exactly by location. We have capital investment that benefits borough-wide, such as purchasing new refuse trucks. There are also projects that are demand-led, such as disabled facilities grants, which are available to residents across the borough. The Housing Revenue Account capital programme also includes investment in our stock across the borough, including Bedworth and Bulkington. There are, of course, some capital projects in specific locations. For instance, during the last financial year, we spent almost £80,000 on improvements to Bedworth Miners Welfare Park. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Jackson. Could I ask Scott Harbison to ask his question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I ask the leader what she intends to do about the dog mess on Edward Street in particular, but also in many other places, the overhanging foliage causing mobility problems in various places, and the continuing litter problem? Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr Harbison. Glendale maintains its shrubs and hedges in accordance with the contractual specifications set by this council. Where overhanging occurs, for which the council is responsible. They are cut back as part of a programme that commences from the end of the bird nesting season. Where the hedge is a private hedge overhanging the public highway, this is a matter referred to the County Highways Authority to deal with. If Mr Hobson has some specific locations in mind, it would be helpful if he could report them to the officers through the council's website that we can investigate, and where necessary that either way appropriate action will be taken to resolve the issues. In regard to dog fouling and littering, the majority of our residents are very responsible. It is an act of antisocial behaviour, and we're working hard to address it in all areas of the borough. Additional cleansing and enforcement resources has been assigned to a number of hotspot areas, including Bedworth Street, in order to tackle local issues. Additional litter bins installations are planned for the area, which will help and be used to control litter and dog waste. Thank you.
And Harry, would you ask your question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome the Borough Council news mentioning success in a bid with a possible investment of up to £25 million from a government fund. Would the leader of the council please advise me what has been the involvement of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council in securing the future High Street bid towards the town centre regeneration? Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am delighted that our Stage 1 application to the Future High Streets Fund for Nuneaton Town Centre has made it through to Stage 2 of the bidding process. This initial application was drawn up by a team of Borough Council officers, supported by officers from Warwickshire County Council. The same team of Borough Council officers has now started working on pulling together a much more detailed application that will be required for Stage 2 of the bidding process, and they will again be working with colleagues from Warwickshire County Council. We will also be using the £150,000 grant provided to us by government to engage appropriate consultants to help us pull all the required information together in what are very tight timescales. We are committed to do so.
Could I ask Joseph Bevan to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note with great pride that 22nd of November marks the bicentenary of the birth of George Eliot, arguably Nuneaton and Bedworth's most famous novelist. With this in mind, I ask for an update on what the Borough is doing to mark this momentous occasion. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Mr Bevan for his question. This weekend will see a host of events in homage of George Eliot. As part of Heritage Weekend, the George Eliot Fellowship is organising a range of events in both Nuneaton and Bedworth, including displays and residents in traditional costume at Bedworth Almshouses, a brand new exhibition at Bedworth Heritage Centre, and the Bicentenary Flower Festival. In Nuneaton on Sunday, Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council will hold a George Eliot Celebration Day in George Eliot Gardens, packed with family fun, live music and entertainment. To honour this special 200th anniversary, the Council will also be unveiling a brand new, interactive Town Centre George Eliot quotation trail, which will include fabulous modern-day interpretations of the quotes by local school children. In November, we are hoping to honour the anniversary date with a plaque in Nuneaton Town Centre. But I'd say to all residents, please come along to these events in both Bedworth and Nuneaton. I'm sure they're going to be fantastic fun, informative, and I have had a sneak preview of the George Eliot Trail videos that young children have done, and they are absolutely fantastic. Hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. And that concludes the public questions. We will move on to agenda item 8, which is the special urgency decisions, which you have there on the... I understand that these urgency decisions are here for noting. Councillor
Madam Mayor,
Jackson.
can I move that we note them?
Okay. Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Anyone else wish to speak? Could Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm always alarmed by special urgency of things that could be done earlier. And on this council house thing, I think we could have raised the issue earlier. It's obviously vital we continued with the programme to transform the council house, but I think we should have actually had earlier warning that actually the capital spending required would be greater. And actually,
The Condacor Council.
The Executive Director for Resources for actually informing me as Leader of the Opposition on the day when she had made this decision, so that we were fully informed about what was going on. That does not, however, detract from some of my concerns, which I did raise at Cabinet subsequently. Whilst this isn't yet on the scale of Gresham Road, we have, it would appear, not quite learnt all the lessons from Gresham Road, because we have seen a 70% inflation in the costs compared to when it initially went to Cabinet for pre-approval. Whilst the idea behind the conversion of the council house is first-rate and fantastic indeed, we were looking at it ourselves, and Councillor Smith, as the shadow portfolio holder, was looking at it as well. I think this highlights even more the fact that what we need to do before we take on any bigger projects is actually engage sooner external advice and expertise in looking at how we cost out these big projects, because as a public sector body, we don't necessarily have the capacity and capability within our offices to be able to look at things which are primarily a private sector function. So I would hope that whilst the project has my blessing and support and I want it to get underway as quickly as possible, I hope that we yet again learn the lessons from this. It's not quite Gresham Road 2, but it could have been if we hadn't have had that get out of jail free card, where we could have had that slight window of opportunity to actually say no, we weren't going to progress it even further. That's a lesson we have learned, but there are still lessons that we could take further for the future, because we do have some exciting plans for the borough, but we need to make sure they're done correctly and properly.
Wilson, it has been proposed and seconded that the urgency decisions are noted. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 10, which is the annual report 2018. Pardon? Oh, sorry. I have to move on to, that was a special urgency, the urgent decisions. I apologise.
Madam Mayor, if it's helpful, I'll move that we note.
All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Condacor.
thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I wanted to make the same point again, that we should actually have known about some of these things, and particularly an urgent decision on timetable of meetings. There's nothing more predictable than actually needing a new calendar each year. So I don't know why that came up so late that it had to be an urgent decision. Yeah, we should always know a few things are happening at the same time each year, and there's about 12 urgent decisions in this list. Really, there should be about 6. And so I do think we need to be looking ahead more and not having so many. It's the same as procurement of insurance policies. We know we need to renew our policies at a certain time, so why doesn't it come up early enough that it's not an urgent decision? And the local council tax support scheme, yet something else that comes at the same time every year. It shouldn't need to be an urgent decision because we know it's coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. It has been proposed and seconded that we note these urgent decisions. Councillor Glass.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor. I would like to move as it is, there's been a mistake made from last year, and I shall put my hand up to that. But I personally thought we had at my panel, we actually put down everything that we did without reporting it to the full council. So I'm going to set my fault through that. But anything else on my part of the recommendations is I'll try and get an answer next time or as soon as possible.
Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you. As really, I'll have my minutes noted, and if there's any questions, I'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I raised this issue at the last report submitted under the special urgency decisions, although I was only given 10 seconds to speak on the matter. The report that's in front of us is for the 18-19 municipal year, and it's right that it's been submitted to council in this municipal year, but we're still waiting for the report for the 2017-2018 municipal year. So could I ask the two overview and scrutiny chairs to ensure that that those two reports are submitted to full council at the next opportunity. I also have two questions to the chairman of the internal overview and scrutiny panel. When considering the Borough Plan Inspector's report, a recommendation was made that members have training on matters regarding the local plan. Can I ask when that training will take place? And my second question is with regards to the recommendation moved on the internal OSP on page 39 with regards to the monitoring of grounds maintenance contract, and a recommendation was moved that encouragement be given for the establishment of Friends of Park groups and resident engagement in other community involvement opportunities. Well, in my opinion, that recommendation means that the panel is happy for the establishment of those groups to take place. And if that's the case, could I ask why the council continues to put obstacles in the way for the Friends of the Nook on the Bedworth Woodlands?
Councillor Glass.
I'm trying to figure out which one's supposed to be addressing. Is it the Friends of the Nook one or the Borough Plan one? All three for me, for my thing. Well, there's obviously there's if there needs to be more training for planning for the Borough Plan, by all means we shall do so. I noticed that since what's happened the last year, we've got a much more formal situation in place, and I think planning should be done. As regarding the Friends of the Nook, I wasn't aware of any particular problems. It hasn't come to my attention. If the councillor has got any particular gripes or things that he can actually say what's happening, because we welcome friends, whether it be of the Nook, or whether Bedworth Park or Nuneaton Park or wherever. If we can get the local populace involved, I think that's a good thing. And the last thing you mentioned about the previous years, okay, I shall have a look at that and we'll try and get it first of all, I think, to the particular panels, and then as an amendment or something to a full council meeting in the not too distant future. I think the points you made today are very helpful, and hopefully we can tweak the things that we're doing in order to make things better.
Moving on then to item... Sorry, Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you very much. The list that I can't see is there's a task and finish group on parking set up, and I wasn't allowed to go on that because the previous year I wasn't on the internal scrutiny, but maybe the chair of the internal scrutiny could tell me what happened with the parking task and finish group. But it's not reported on the list. Thank you.
To make sure you receive a report of what happened on that car parking working party. Can I now take a vote on the annual report of the 2018-2019 overview and scrutiny panels? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11, the sub-regional materials recycling facility. Councillor Shepherd.
This report seeks approval for the Borough Council to invest capital monies in the local authority owned and operated materials recycling facility in Coventry to allow the facility to be built and operated. By way of background, in order to try and address the uncertainty and increasing high costs which local authorities face when contracting with private sector MRF operators. Councils across our sub-region have been exploring the possibility of building a public sector owned and operated MRF next to the waste to energy plant at Whitley in Coventry. This work is being led by Coventry City Council on behalf of the other local authorities. Cabinet have considered confidential reports on the project to deliver a local authority owned and operated MRF at their meetings on the 10th of April and the 4th of September, and those reports are still confidential. The recommendation approved by Cabinet from these two meetings are set out in paragraphs 3, 7 and 3.8 of tonight's report. And one of the recommendations approved by Cabinet at their meeting on the 4th of September is to recommend to Council that our capital programme and Treasury Management Strategy are amended to allow a capital loan of up to 3.3 million to be made and up to 96,000 of shares in the local authority owned MRF operating company to be purchased. This recommendation to Council is to allow us to access the significant operational and financial advantages that the sub-regional MRF will offer. Section 6 of the report deals with the financial issues, and a summary of the annual financial implications are shown in the table of paragraph 6.310. Taking into account both the operational budget savings and the return on investment, there is an anticipated 368,000 a year financial benefit to the Council, and Section 7 of tonight's report comments on future governance arrangements, and Section 8 of the report deals with risks and sensitivities. Appendix 1A sets out the proposed update General Fund Capital Programme, and Appendix 1B sets out the proposed revised Treasury and Prudential indications. The recommendations of the Council set out in 2.1 of the report. I am aware that members have been to Cabinet and spoke, and they're broadly in favour of this proposal. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Is there a seconder for the recommendation?
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to second this and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you.
To be sadly an expert on rubbish, it got me into politics in 2006 when we actually had the discussions about the incinerator that was proposed to be built, and then the decisions about building a bigger incinerator in Coventry. At that time, it was all predicated against having more and more and more waste, and the amount of waste in Warwickshire doubling. We now have this facility, which is again predicated against growing and growing amount of waste. And if you look in the report, it mentions our waste going up for the MRF, that's the stuff that goes in the mixed recycling bin, going up to 11,000 tonnes a year. Every year, for the last 5 or 6 years since we've had this palm recycling contract, we have put between 9,000 and 8,000 tonnes through the palm, the mixed recycling contract. The waste hasn't grown. What is happening is, as we get more people, actually we're getting less newspapers, various products are being redesigned to be light-weighted, there's various things going on that actually counteract the growth in the number of people, so that very roughly the amount of recycling in tonnes has stayed the same. So I am concerned that this report is predicated against rising waste, but that concern would be mitigated if we had more partners on board. And at 4.3, it mentions there's 2 more councils that are considering coming in as partners for this, because I believe the current tonnage is a bit marginal to make this viable. We know what's happening. We know we're going to get take-back schemes. You know, this payback, you pay for your plastic bottle, you get deposit return schemes. There's all sorts of things going on to reduce waste, and this is a 25-year project. So I am concerned about the project. The principle is a good one, but it needs enough tonnage to make it viable. And it also needs an awful lot of education. So when we take a big saving from having this brilliant sorting plant in Coventry, we actually need to spend maybe £30,000 of our savings actually educating people, publicity, so that people put the right stuff in the right bins and people do actually use the system properly. Otherwise, we actually waste a lot of money building a plant and then people putting the wrong stuff through the plant. So although I'm broadly in favour, it does need to be done right. We do need to have enough partners on board to get the tonnage there. And if I had enough people to second me, I would recommend we go ahead with this if 1 or 2 more partners go on board, because that will mean the financial risk is less. At the moment, we're talking about almost £4 million. If you add all the 3.3 and 200 whatever, this is almost £4 million commitment. So we do need to be careful. And if other partners are going on board, I think it's got a good chance of being viable. If there's only the 6 councils, I am afraid, particularly with deposit return schemes, cutting down the amount of waste going in the brown lidded bin, that we might be short on waste for our new plant. Thank you.
Sir Wilson.
I've had briefings from both executive directors on this, and quite in detailed briefings over a number of months, which I am thankful for, and I've had the opportunity, along with my deputy, to ask some rather deep, meaningful and probing questions, which at times I'm sure they haven't always enjoyed, but has been a necessary part of the role. We are broadly supportive of this, and I could not, based on the information that I've had and discussions, second Councillor Condacor's proposals, because the facts are outlined for us in the report. That at the moment, those are the savings of 368, I think it was, £1,000 worth of savings. If other partner agencies, partner councils come on board, the savings are actually potentially even more, because it would help lower the gate fees, etc., and perhaps more tonnage coming in that we can sell, that we could get back through the dividend. But one thing that hasn't yet been dealt with to my satisfaction, and that of the group on this side, is about oversight and scrutiny. So I would like to move an amendment to the recommendations, Madam Mayor, and I have enough copies to go around if people want them, which is to insert recommendation 2.2, so 2.1 will stand, and insert 2.2 that the Executive Director Operations and Director for Arts, Leisure and Democracy prepare a report for the next full council to outline recommendations for establishing a robust method of scrutinising and overseeing the establishment and work of the sub-regional material recycling facility and how MBBC's shareholding in the new asset company is exercised. Now, that may be that we look at it on a sub-regional scrutiny basis, or we look at it on a council scrutiny basis, and that would form, hopefully, part of the report from the 2 officers. But reading Part 8, 8.1 and 8.2 in particular, it highlights even more the need to make sure that we have robust scrutiny of what is going on through the development phase and as the company moves forward. Now, those of us who have been involved in NABCEL will know that we started off gently and moved in terms of pace from 0 to 10 miles per hour, then on to 20, then 30 and so on. But there is the danger that we go from 0 to 70 without ensuring that we have the right scrutiny in place. My own preferred method, and it may be something the officers come back with, is something along like we have with the NABCEL Shareholder Committee, where we examine what our shareholder does and how we oversee that on our side. Because we are talking about, altogether, when you add the different pots of money, in the region of a £37 million development. And it will be a multi-million pound turnover once this business is operational. And we need to know, everyone as councillors, regardless of our political persuasion, that the £3.3 million we're putting in as a loan and the other start-up costs are working, and when it is working and up and running, that it is working appropriately and properly. Because at the moment, there will only be that one voice around that table with all the other councils, and nothing feeding back to us as the remaining 33 other elected members about how things are going. I think it is an entirely appropriate and proper amendment, but and it is, in all honesty, an attempt at a friendly amendment to reconcile some of the differences that we have and concerns while allowing the project itself to move forward. Because I do accept, and we accept on these benches, the project is necessary because we know what the future predictions are for recycling growth and the need to make sure that we deal with our legal obligations, but we have to make sure we do so in a responsible manner. And this, I hope, will get unanimous support across the chamber, because that's what it is what it is designed to do, which is ensure that we have the necessary check and balance for giving the £3.3 million plus the other expenditure that we do. I have no problem with the workings out that the office have done, because Simone's gone through it in great detail with me, so has Brent, but this is the one remaining factor that I need addressing that makes me satisfied we are working in the right direction. I commend it to the Council and hope that all members will support this tonight, because we should not be writing a cheque for £3.3 million without making sure we have the appropriate oversight and scrutiny of what is happening to our money and the company we end up setting up. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Walmsley.
I was due to speak on a substantive motion, Madam Mayor, rather than this, but I'll second this motion, for, the amendment by Councillor Wilson. I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. The amendment that's been proposed by Councillor Wilson. Personally, I'm all in favour of this project, and I'd like to thank Director Davies for answering the questions and some of the concerns that I've had over this. But I would like to give my personal support to this project. I think it's a good idea, and I think when it's set up and when it starts getting into operation, I think residents will really start to see the benefits of the project. But I do share the concern about the scrutiny aspect, and I suppose you could say the governance arrangements behind it. When we put in this amount of money from the taxpayers into this project, and rightfully so, but I think residents would expect us as councillors to be able to scrutinise the actions of the portfolio holder, who I suspect would be the would cast the vote on behalf of this authority. I mean, some of my personal idea at the time was that the portfolio holder for refuse could potentially submit quarterly reports to the internal OSP, so that way we could ask questions that way. But equally, I think a shareholder committee would work as well. But I just wanted to put on record my personal support for the project. Thank you.
Yeah, just of, if this is coming back to look at the governance at the next full council, I think we do need to also look at the freedom of information aspects of the governance, because obviously being an asset co, it may or may not be inside the regime of freedom of information. And I think I might not be a councillor for the 25 years this project goes on, but I might want to know if the waste is going to be burnt or recycled, or what the destination of it is. So I think if we are actually looking at scrutiny and bringing something forward, we should also clarify the access to information rights. Thank you.
Yes, that was already going to be considered anyway as part of the report that went to Cabinet. So I don't see any reason why we can't support the amendment that has been moved.
If there are no further speakers, Councillor Shepherd, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support the amendment you put through. I think, yes, it's a way forward, and I'm happy to include it within the recommendations. And saying that, I'm happy then, Madam Mayor, to move to the vote.
Therefore, as an exception of a friendly amendment, and therefore the entire piece becomes a substantive. I wanted to speak specifically on this section, but the broader point. Hence why I'd sort of said I'll make those remarks later, but I'm happy to take...
As printed, when one falls, it either does or does not become a substantive motion, at which point we will debate the issue again.
If you want to take that as an alteration,
Okay. I am told that because the mover of the motion has accepted the friendly amendment, it does become a substantive motion. So Do we have any speakers? Motion, Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank your forbearance on that one. Could you just grab your mic? Sorry, Madam. Just wanted to make some points slightly more about the more specific, or the wider points about the project rather than the specific element of Councillor Wilson's amendment, hence why I wanted to speak on the substantive rather than the amendment. So now we've dealt with that. One of the big things that I think, and this is something I continually raised when we did the retender for the collection element of our recycling, is actually about, and one of the biggest benefits I can see of this is actually about moving potentially quicker to a commingled collection. Because, as I understand and from the reports, many of our neighbouring authorities do a commingled collection of their recycling anyway, and the intention is to try and set the plant up to accept that from the beginning. And I do remember that, because we had a very lively debate, I think in OSP from memory, at the time when this came before us, the curbside element came before us, that by moving from our current segregated section to commingling, the collection costs, we could save nearly £250,000 a year on the collection costs, and that would be over and above what actually this project in itself can save. So for me, I think I share Councillor Wilson a couple of concerns about the democratic oversight, and I'm very grateful for the acceptance of our friendly amendment this evening. But for me, there are potential other savings that we can look at further down the road as a result of this project, and because the reason at the time for not moving to commingling to save the nearly £250,000 a year on collection was that we wouldn't get as much at the end result, because our person we sold the recycling to took it as segregated and we got a higher price. Well, in that instance, if we're setting up from the beginning of commingled, you see there are further elements down the line that I think we could really look to explore, and this actually not just saves us on our per gate fee versus the current contract, as I understand, but we'll actually also potentially have some spin-off benefits like that in the future, and we're all for saving money. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Therefore, I will take the vote on the substantive motion. All those in favour, please show. That is agreed. And any against? Oh, sorry, Councillor Condicourt. Move on to item 12, which is questions from members. Pardon? From Cabinet, sorry. Cabinet report questions. Julie. Sorry.
As always, my Cabinet members and myself are more than happy to answer any questions that members may have on this particular item. All of the items are there. I think they're quite self-explanatory. With no further ado, I'll present the report, Madam Mayor.
Ask a question to the Leader of the Council, yet again about the combined authority. Since May, we have not sent a single representative to the Combined Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which we hold a seat on. We had these problems in the last municipal year. If Labour cannot be bothered to turn up to these meetings, could you please give that seat to someone in the Conservative group who will go to the meetings and will represent the borough? Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Madam Mayor, I've often said to Councillor Everly what the West Midlands Combined Authority Constitution is. Nuneaton and Bedworth does not hold an overview and scrutiny seat on the West Midlands Combined Authority at this moment in time. Indeed, the non-constituent members' seats are determined by the non-constituent members. It is my understanding that we are no longer have a seat on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I believe we still retain a seat on the Audit Committee, Madam Mayor. I believe that to be the case, but I am more than happy to make sure that Councillor Evans, indeed all members, receive a list of all the meetings to which members can attend.
At the West Midlands Combined Authority, item B, which is the carbon reduction budget. The West Midlands Combined Authority is had the climate change emergency debate, it is taking action on the climate change and having its carbon reduction policy. Various councils like Warwick and Rugby have had climate emergency motions put to them, and I was really expecting this council to have this meeting, or even the last meeting, a carbon reduction, climate emergency type motion put to it. This council seems to be dragging its feet, and it's even slower than the West Midlands Combined Authority at looking at reducing carbon and actually trying to survive and make life survivable on Earth. We really do have an emergency, and this council is doing nothing. Are you, as a council, going to take action on it? And where are we with the West Midlands Combined Authority? Because it mentioned in here about targets being taken down to the individual authorities. Thank you.
I think
Councillor Wilson.
On 2A, which is the 24th of July Cabinet meeting, whilst it's down for the Central Services and Refuse portfolio holder, my point actually might cross both that and the planning portfolio holder. At the Cabinet meeting, I raised a concern about, whilst we would be charging for the green and black and the recycling bins to the developers now instead of the council paying for it, which on the face of it does sound like a good idea, we all know that developers have a habit of coming back and quoting the word that all of us on the planning committee hate, which is viability. What work has been done by either department to provide reassurance that in asking for these contributions to pay for the bins, that it will not affect viability for future planning applications, because paying for the bins this way could mean a multi-use games area doesn't get developed on one of the new housing sites as part of the borough plan. As someone who has a site in my ward, actually I have 2 sites in my ward, I would be rather concerned that I would lose out because of viability on a multi-use games area because the council will no longer fund the bins. Can I have some reassurance that that will not be an issue?
I always try to be. I don't know regarding the viability aspect of a planning application that would come to us and they would say, we can't afford to do X, Y and Z because you're charging me £60 for a bin on each house. So I would find it very unlikely with the money that is involved in development, but I will look at the problem and get back to you.
Councillor Phillips. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, if my memory serves me right, on a previous full council meeting and when we were talking about the combined authority, I seem to recall we had a debate to recognise the considerable extra amount of money that our residents have to pay in regards to bus fares and rail transport. And again, if my memory serves me right, I believe that we agreed to write to the Warwickshire County Council to see if they would become a full member of the combined authority, which would possibly enable us to get the same benefits as the rest of the West Midlands do. So I'm wondering what the answer to that letter was. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Councillor Jackson.
It's interesting, only yesterday I actually asked one of the executive directors if we had received a response to that letter that was sent shortly after the last council meeting, as I recollect. I was told as of yesterday that no response has been received. I will actually ask Executive Director to follow up that letter, because I think it's absolutely vital that residents in Nuneaton and Bedworth get the same benefits of subsidised or cheaper rail and bus fares than we do in our borough. It's you only have to walk across the road in some wards within Bedworth, and you're in Coventry and you can get on the West Midlands buses and rail fares. And I know myself that going from Coventry to Birmingham to a meeting is actually a lot cheaper than going from Nuneaton to Birmingham. And it seems to me we should very much be welcoming any benefits from that. But I will actually ask that we write again, following up and asking if a response is forthcoming. Thank you.
Sir Evans.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock's question has been allowed to have been put, because when I attempted to make a question about bus services and the combined authority, the leader replied it had nothing to do with us. Now, I don't know if in response to my question, the leader of the council tried to wing it, but I don't make up my questions on the spot. I do my research beforehand. And just to clarify, I am currently looking at the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Monday the 15th of July 2019 at 10 a.m. And I'm looking at all the members, the councillors who attended, and there's a lot of members on here from non-constituent members. So if the leader of the council is telling us that the combined authority have amended the constitution to exclude Nuneaton and Bedworth from sitting on overview and scrutiny committees, could I ask her, what did she say at the board meetings in response to that? Did she stand up for Nuneaton and Bedworth? Because we deserve a seat on that committee. We pay over £20,000 a year, and I reiterate that if you aren't going to be bothered to turn up, let someone on this side of the house do it.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I've not have a seat on overview and scrutiny. I will clarify that, and I've already said I will make sure that all elected members receive that information. However, Nuneaton and Bedworth does hold a seat on the audit committee, and we do have regular attendance. Not every non-constituent member has a seat on every single subcommittee of the West Midlands Combined Authority. And I think members on this side of the chamber actually try their utmost to attend meetings and represent this authority where there is a direct benefit for the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. I will clarify the position in regard to overview and scrutiny. I said that in my first answer to Councillor Evans. I have every intention of doing that, and I will make sure that all members receive an advice note in that regard. Thank you.
Tromans.
Refer to the Cabinet report. C, in relation to the Council House conversion, questions really, I'm directing these at the leader. A potentially massive overspend. How have the Council yet again got it so wrong? Why was no expert external advice taken before now? The lessons from Gresham Road have seemingly not been learnt. And in responding, I would remind the leader that the council had the council house built and have been the only owners and occupants of it. So how did they not know what the condition of the property was? It's another huge gaffe, hundreds of thousands. So, you know, to continue, can the councillor comment? Can the leader let us know? Is it simply a question that, like Gresham Road and so many other things that we've heard about, they're just incapable of completing this kind of large-scale major project, and that they need to outsource it to people that can? Or maybe she would agree with me and my colleagues that perhaps residents think a better way of dealing with this would be, come May, to vote in a Conservative administration who will partners and
subject under discussion.
And
I will not put up with that sort of behaviour from elected members. Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we have some excellent officers of this council. And actually to suggest, as has been mentioned, the leader of the opposition tonight has used the word capability. You have yourself said we need expertise externally. On occasions we do. But I am standing here saying I have the utmost respect for the integrity of our officers and the way in which they try to do the jobs. Council House, yes, costs have increased. But so also has the provision for people who find themselves homeless. So if you'd have read the report carefully, you would have seen all of the reasons why costs have increased. We're going to have more rooms available for homeless families. And I'm sure, Councillor Tremond, you will welcome that. You will say that's fantastic, because actually people who are homeless need every bit of support we can give them. So I thank Councillor Tromans for saying we're spending more on this, because actually we're going to get a better provision for people who find themselves in the unfortunate position of being homeless. So I really thank Councillor Tromans, and I know he's nodding, so he's supporting my delight that this is providing further provision for homeless people. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
As a follow-on from what's just been discussed, can you then confirm that all the increased costs are as a direct result of providing more homes more shelter for the homeless, or is it indeed was the Cabinet report that we've seen, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm not sure what's confidential and what's not, but that doesn't accord with the Cabinet report that we've seen. So can you actually stand up and confirm that 100% of the cost increase is down to simply increasing the number of beds that we have, or were there other factors involved in the cost increase?
For increased costs. What I was saying in regard to Councillor Tromans' question is, I welcome money being spent to assist some of the most vulnerable people in our community. The one thing I believe every citizen in our nation is entitled to is a roof over their head. We need to provide high quality accommodation for homeless people, and I have every respect for the work that is going on in regard to this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Was that a confirmation? And I am 100% in agreement that people need roofs over their heads. I think you'll find I'm one of the biggest advocates for this within the chamber. To some nasty comments that I've received from other people in the chamber. However, can you then say categorically this is because we have increased the beds or not? I agree. This needs to be done. We need to provide high quality rooms for people to stay in, but that doesn't accord with the Cabinet report that we've seen. So the huge increase in costs, is the Cabinet report wrong, or is there other factors other than increase in the number of beds that have been a catalyst for this huge cost increase? And I would say that it's not technically a cost increase depending on which way you look at it, but I think the numbers were wrong. But obviously we can't go into too much detail, can we? Because it's all on pink. It'll come out one day, but it's all on pink currently. So
I think there are other factors, Madam Mayor.
Right, that concludes the questions to Cabinet members. If I could just refer back to an issue that was raised a little while ago with reference to reports from overview and scrutiny committees. I am informed that the 2017-18 annual report of overview and scrutiny committees came to Council in April 2018. So that has answered that question. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 13A, recommendations from Cabinet or other committees. Councillor Tracy Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Despite myself not actually being in attendance at the meeting held on the 4th of July, I have been advised that it is still my responsibility to move this recommendation tonight. It is my understanding that when the Council adopted the executive and scrutiny model, this was done so in order to speed up the decision-making process. Madam Mayor, I move the recommendation, but I shan't be supporting it this evening. Thank you.
Please, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Shepherd for moving the recommendation. I would have been happy to do it myself, as I was the councillor at the external overview and scrutiny panel who moved the amendment to the overview and scrutiny guide on the 4th of July. And therefore, I would like to explain the rationale as to why I propose the amendment and to explain why I would encourage other members to support the amendment this evening. At present, with the current call-in procedure, you have just 5 days to call in a certain item that Cabinet has agreed to move forward to another committee or to council or whatever. I personally believe that the 5 days simply is not long enough. In order for members to engage positively with the process of calling, I think we need to have more time to submit an application to call an item in. In the last municipal year, I strongly considered calling in the item about the timetable of committee meetings because I believe the timings of some of the council meetings actually discourage members of the public from attending. I don't know if that's done on purpose or not, but by the time I had consulted with other members of the council, the deadline already went, and obviously that meant I didn't get the time to get the appropriate signatures necessary for an item to be called in. So that's very simply why I moved the amendment on the 4th of July. I think the call-in procedures should give councillors more days to call in an item. I feel the amendment, if passed, would make the council's scrutiny procedures better, and I hope members will join with me in voting in favour of this recommendation this evening.
I too will support the recommendation. I wasn't on the overview and scrutiny panel which considered it, but we also have to remember that 5 days isn't actually an awful long time to try and get things done for a call-in. As someone who's actually done it in the past, I suppose I'm one of the few people who actually knows what is involved in organising a call-in, and actually trying to go through all of the requirements set out in the Constitution for the reasons for actually putting a call-in together are quite detailed and in-depth, and you need time to be able to consider your reasons for calling. And not only that, but the call-in procedure kicks in you have 5 working days from the date of publication. Now, the date of publication isn't set. It could be published 5 days after the meeting. It could be published the next day. And as members, and I appreciate the Committee Services Department work tremendous wonders on some occasions, but we do not have that guarantee, for example, that the minutes will be published the next day, or they'll be published 5 days, or they'll be published 7 days. So there is no certainty to allow members to be able to plan a call-in and go through this, and if necessary, potentially seek advice from officers about their interpretation of the requirements within the Constitution. Now, I do not see, and I do not agree with Councillor Shepherd's assertion that it will slow down the decision-making process under the new executive arrangements, because we already have a process in place if something is exceptionally urgent. That is where it is marked not for call-in, effectively denying councillors the right to call something in because it is so exceptionally urgent that to do so would undermine the principles behind that call-in. If it is not marked for call-in, then there is no urgency to that decision. But if you extend the logic accordingly, if it is not marked for call-in, it is not exceptionally urgent, and therefore a reason to refuse changing the rules tonight. Now, under the old system, I never served under the old system, but I remember Councillor Harvey in Constitutional Review working parties waxing lyrical about it in some respects, and some people might actually believe the committee system is better. But in some respects, it wasn't, because, as I understand it, the committee system, you had to wait for the relevant committee to actually convene and meet, deliberate, make a decision, and then the decision to be implemented. So you could be waiting between committee meetings, depending on how long they're spaced out. You could be waiting 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 weeks, or you've got to look at convening an emergency meeting. So this still complies with the spirit and the letter of the Local Government Act 2000 and enables proper democratic scrutiny of the decisions. And let's not forget that this is a hung council. Come May, I hope I'll be sat where Councillor Jackson is, we never know. But if she is sat where I am now, she will want to be able to hold me as leader of the council, if I am leader of the council, to account. So never think you are always going to have the right of governance. You may want to use the very same procedures that we are aiming to modify now to your advantage, or to make sure that there is an element of scrutiny which you genuinely don't think has been taken account of. This isn't saying delay it 20 days, delay it by a month. It's asking for a reasonable extension to enable the democratic process to take place and for something to be considered. That's all it does, no other ulterior motive. I can see no reason for the the controlling group refusing this, except for the fact they don't want to see democratic oversight done properly. Just remember, you could be sat here in 9 months' time.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you very much. My belief in scrutiny, I will not be supporting this motion, basically because any bright party who gets the paperwork 7 days ahead of any cabinet member, any cabinet meeting, any major decisions should, as a group, have some idea what they're going to do at that cabinet meeting or straight after the cabinet meeting when the papers are published. And we have sat over there in the past, and we have worked to the same call-in procedures. We called it in, yes, we called it in, following these procedures, because we called in Glendale and you're outsourcing of the Parks Department, which couldn't afford to bring it back. And it isn't a conversation. So we might be sitting there. But I'll tell you what, we're quite happy to follow these rules. So I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Walmsley.
I rise, and I believe, if recollection serves, I think I was the person to second this particular recommendation at the relevant overview and scrutiny panel. And my reasoning for doing so then was quite clear. I completely agree with what Councillor Evans has said, and I think that we should always try and do what we can to make scrutiny and to make the best decisions of this council possible. And actually, Councillor Wilson brought a very interesting point that I hadn't thought of prior to his speech, and that was about, as he says very clearly, about items that are particularly urgent, which would therefore null and void a number of the comments that were made from the other side on the two speeches so far, that actually already are marked not for call in. And in fact, some items that aren't particularly urgent have all been marked not for call-in already. So actually, there is already a limit to an attempt by the ruling group to limit the scrutiny that we can do anyway. Some of the most major projects, which now have, funny enough, being overspending, were marked not for call-in. So actually, perhaps we should have a wider review of the whole call-in process. However, relevant to this specific one, I think that 10 days is a perfectly reasonable amendment. It should be noted that the external overview and scrutiny panel did agree and did support and put this recommendation to us, hence why it's here tonight. And so actually this is a panel of scrutiny themselves asking for the way in which they convene, the rules which govern them. They are asking us as a full council, effectively we sit with two hats. You know, you sit as a when in overview and scrutiny, you sit with your overview and scrutiny hat on. In the chamber here, we sit with our hat on as our chamber hats. And they are very much asking, and I don't think it particularly right, that we as a council tonight should withhold a very reasonable request from a body that does overview and scrutiny to us, and I think this should therefore be voted through very quickly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
It's disagreements. And we should actually have proper debate about the details of stuff when it's a controversial decision. And scrutiny works far better than meetings of a full council to get down to the details, which is why call-ins are really important. They shouldn't be overused. Yeah, I would expect only one call-in a year would be a reasonable amount of level. But in my time, 7.5 years or so in this chamber, I can't remember a call in here. It's frightening how difficult it is. And at the county council, we have about one call in a year. Sometimes we have none, sometimes we have two. But I think we do need to actually look at our rules to make sure we do have an ability for opposition groups to call things in. And we do need to be clear. I mean, I looked at the definition. It says 5 days. It's got a big table at the back. It doesn't define what a day is. Is it a working day? If it's a working day, then actually it's less than a week potentially. And so I do think we need to have 10 maybe calendar days, which is a week and a bit. Because people go away, people do work, people do things, and also the other problem with scrutiny calling stuff in is getting all the signatures and doing all the bureaucracy, which takes time. So if you want a short period, you've got to make it easy. Allow email call-ins, etc. But if it's all bureaucratic, I remember trying to do the one for the parking charge increase when we did have enough members in my group, when I had a group, to call things in. And we had to run around getting signatures from people. So you had to make sure people were in. So I think we need a better system. Scrutiny is working really badly at the moment. And we have officers not coming to scrutiny meetings. We have very infrequent scrutiny meetings with massive agendas. And the whole system is breaking down, largely from shoving everything onto one scrutiny committee for everything internal. But I really do support this. It's not ideal. I don't think they've got it right, necessarily, in terms of all the practicalities. But it's a lot better than what we've got. We should change the system. And democracy isn't working here because we do not have discussions about important changes. And like the material recycling plant, generally people agree with it, but the people want details sorted. I particularly want to talk about the education aspect.
Recommendation.
The point actually, if we had something like the MRF project going to a scrutiny panel as a call-in or as some pre-scrutiny, we could have sorted a few of the questions out and maybe had a better project that's got less overspending and more education. Thank you.
I have no further speakers. Councillor Tracy Shepherd, do you wish your right to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to go to the vote. Thank you.
We will move to the vote on the recommendation that has been moved. All
Okay. If you could indicate for or against, please. Councillor Beaumont. Against. Councillor Brindley Edwards. For. Councillor Brown apologies. Councillor Croft. For. Councillor Daffin. Yes. Councillor Doherty. Yes. Councillor Elliott. Yes. Councillor Evans. For. Councillor Gazane's apologies. Councillor Glass. Against. Councillor Golby. For. Councillor Gran. For. Councillor Gutteridge. For. Councillor Hancox. Against. Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson, Councillor Condacore, Councillor Llewellyn-Nash, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Longdon, apologies, Councillor Pandair, Councillor Phillips, Councillor Pomfret, Councillor Rudkin, Councillor A. Sargent, Councillor J. Sargent, Councillor J. Shepherd, Councillor T. Shepherd, Councillor Smith, Councillor Tandy, Councillor Tromans, Councillor Walmsley, Councillor Watkins and Councillor Wilson.
The recommendation is lost. Yes.
Just on a point of order, could you please tell me what the exact result was in terms of numbers?
$15 for, 16 against. We then move on to the annual Treasury Management Report 2018-2019.
The recommendations as printed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 14, notices of motions. The first one being from, just a minute, got to find the right papers. Kyle Evans, isn't it? The High Street Fund. I haven't got the list of who's moving there. Oh. Understand that Councillor Wilson is moving them. The future of the High Street Fund, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
No problem, Madam Mayor. I think we've all experienced a frog in our throat in this chamber at some point. I wish to move the motion fund. It has been really pleasing news that this Conservative government has put us forward for the first round of the Future High Streets Fund, and that we now have the opportunity of a once-in-a-generation chance to actually regenerate Nuneaton Town Centre. And I accept all the reasons why, and I supported all the reasons why Nuneaton went first, because we were further along the work being done with the Transforming Nuneaton agenda. But as I have said in this chamber before, as much as I support transforming Nuneaton, if a transforming Bedworth option becomes available, then that will also have my full support. And based on the comments given by the leader tonight, I expect that this motion will get unanimous support. But I think it is also important that not just words in a question, but also the result of a motion is far more effective, because it puts on record a definitive act, a definitive vote of a council about its intentions and the way it intends to move forward on such important issues. Now, Bedworth Town Centre is very much beloved by all the Bedworth residents, and indeed by residents further afield. Indeed, my formative years, my grandmother actually moved from Birmingham to Bedworth, so she knew Bedworth better than Nuneaton. And so, even when she moved from Nuneaton, she still went and shopped in Bedworth. And so, as a little toddler, you get dragged around the shops and this, that and the other, as you do when you've got kids with you. And I too have seen the unfortunate decline of Bedworth Town Centre. It isn't anymore... It used to have a certain feeling about it, a sense of community, a sense of place and a sense of being. And residents, you'd hear them like you'd expect it from a traditional 1950s or 60s video clip that you'd see, that sense of feeling. You'd go down the wool shop, you'd pick up, you'd have a chat with your friends. In fact, you'd probably spend more time chatting with your friends than you did doing the shopping, especially if you're anything like my grandmother. But it's important, Madam Mayor, that we as a council take a positive step to actually put on record and say that should the opportunity become available, we stand foursquare behind Bedworth as much as we do Nuneaton. And so I expect it to get unanimous support. And in answer to Lubbs, I'm not even going to try and pronounce your surname. We've tried this before, and it didn't work. If a transforming Bulkington option comes forward, all power to the elbow, let's do it. But let's make sure that this council puts on record its actions. The leader has given a statement, now let's see it match up with a vote. And I hope it is unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder for the proposal, please?
My right to speak.
Q member wish to speak. Councillor Evans.
I welcome the government's announcement that Nuneaton has indeed benefited from the Future High Streets Fund. However, on the same day as the announcement was made, many Bedworth residents were appalled that yet again the council decided to look over Bedworth Town Centre and ignore the wishes of residents for redevelopment in Bedworth Town Centre alongside Nuneaton, because people in Bedworth are not against regeneration in Nuneaton, but they want to see regeneration in both towns, and Bulkington as well, and rightfully so. Since the announcement, I've had 22 separate emails from local residents in the Slough ward who are yet again dismayed that Bedworth is not getting the same level of investment as Nuneaton, sorry. Now, I, for one, I'm not against regeneration in the Nuneaton. I warmly welcome the investment to regenerate any high streets, wherever that may be. But my residents want the assurance that the council will be applying for the Future High Streets Fund at the second round of applications in 2020. I don't support having a joint application where both towns come under the same umbrella, because I think, as Councillor Wilson alluded to, both towns have very different needs. And whilst, and equally, both urgently need regeneration. But we heard after the local elections that the council had hired a consultancy firm to conduct an independent study on the future of Bedworth Town Centre. And to date, none of us on the opposition have heard anything about the results of such an independent study. Equally, the external overview and scrutiny panel moved a recommendation that a Bedworth Town Centre action team be established. Again, to date, we've heard absolutely nothing. And as a result, Bedworth residents feel left behind. And I do sympathise with those residents who share that opinion. And I think the council leader has to take this issue extremely seriously. Already, in the last 2 weeks, hundreds of residents in Bedworth have demanded that we have a town council. And if the leader doesn't step up and take leadership and send an application off at the second round of funding, I'm afraid, in fact I'm sure, that a petition will land on the doorsteps of this town hall calling for that referendum. So the leader has to take the concerns of Bedworth residents seriously, because at the moment the council are putting the future of our borough at risk by dividing both towns, and we seriously cannot do that. And I think it raises a separate matter as well, that not one councillor from Bedworth or Bulkington is represented on the cabinet. So it means that Bedworth and Bulkington don't get our voice at the top table. And Madam Mayor, I do accept we are where we are, and we have to look forward. The leader has to ensure an application for Bedworth is sent off for the second round of funding for the Future High Streets Fund in 2020. And the process may work very well, because the council can learn from the mistakes, if it did make any mistakes, when they applied for the Nuneaton funding. Madam Mayor, I will reiterate my belief that Bedworth Town Centre has so much potential and opportunities that we desperately need a council leadership which is willing to step up and unlock that potential. The people of Bedworth want the council to submit an application for the Future High Streets Fund in 2020. Will 17 Labour councillors stand in their way?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe I've been in a different meeting tonight, because I've already made Bedworth, Bulkington and the whole of our borough are, as well as Nuneaton, Madam Mayor. I'm more than happy, Madam Mayor, to agree this motion this evening. I welcome, of course, the recent announcement, and I have repeatedly stated that we will submit a bid for the second round of applications for Bedworth Town Centre. I've said that previously, I've said it tonight, and I'm reiterating it, so there can be no doubt that that's what I've said. We need continued support from Warwickshire County Council, and indeed ongoing support in our endeavours from the 3 MPs. Nuneaton and Bedworth is united to achieve no hollow words, but serious intent. I believe our borough has a bright future and will be working hard with others to realise and maximise its potential. This should be a vision shared by each and every councillor in this chamber. So, Madam Mayor, I would move that we move straight to the vote. My statement is clearly restated this evening, as it has been on previous occasions. Let's fight for both our town centres, let's fight for our whole borough, and let's do it united to achieve.
I now have a proposal to move to the vote on this. Could I finish, please? I now have a proposal to move to the vote on this notice of motion. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Thank you. Now, take your point of order. Now I've finished speaking.
Madam Mayor, on a point of order, the Constitution clearly states that motions and reports and recommendations to this Willie. Madam Mayor, only one Bedworth councillor has been given the chance to take part in this debate. Will you please give other Bedworth councillors the opportunity to represent our local residents?
I have no choice. I have a proposal on the table that we move to the vote. I have no choice but to take this proposal that I have to the vote.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Actually, what you're saying is factually inaccurate. The Constitution's words say that the vote move to the vote can only take place if and when the Mayor has declared there has been sufficient debate. And also that has to be you have to give a formal ruling that there has been sufficient debate for that to be entered into the minutes. Now, could you please clarify, A, whether you believe there has been adequate debate, bearing in mind, I believe, the very well-founded comments of Councillor Evans, and also put your ruling into the minutes formally for all to see, Madam Mayor?
I intend to move to a vote. As a proposal has been made to move to the vote, I intend to move to the vote, and no prevarication from anywhere else change my mind. All those... no, I'm sorry, I'm taking no order. Do you intend to question every single decision I make in this chamber? What behaviour? I'll listen to the before yours. Okay, you've raised your... Hear it.
I will give my point of order, but I would like you to turn your microphone off so that it can be adequately heard, please. Thank you.
Is that your point of order?
No, a right to speak. So I would like my right to speak now, please.
I am satisfied with the amount of debate that has taken place in this chamber on this item, especially bearing in mind that the Leader of the Council has said that we are supporting this notice of motion. So therefore, I intend to move to the vote now. All those in favour, please show.
Madam Mayor, is it a vote on moving to the vote?
It's a vote on moving to the vote. All those in favour of moving to the vote, please show. Can you count, please? Yeah. And Bill. Yeah. Those against? Bill's voted against as well. The vote is 15-15, so I will use my casting vote in favour of moving. The vote is 15-15. Can you just be quiet for 1 minute, please? So they won. So the vote. I will. It was 16, 15, and 15, 15. Right. Thank you. Now that I have clarification from officers, the vote was 16 not to move to the vote and 15 to move to the vote. So the debate will continue.
Point of order.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will rise to move a point of order, and it is in this regard. I think it is very important that there is respect for the Mayor in these meetings. It is shocking, frankly, the lack of respect being shown. We can disagree, we can raise points of order, but we should do so in a dignified and helpful manner. Madam Mayor, I find it quite embarrassing tonight that I do believe you have been treated with some lack of respect.
Thank you. We will continue with the debate. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually more than happy to vote with this that's been put in front of us tonight. And I just wanted to, just before I get into my main part of it, make a couple of points really. And one was in regards when Mr Seckwich spoke about the emptying of Bedworth early on a Saturday afternoon. Traditionally, Madam Mayor, people in Bedworth have gone up the town, done what they need to do very early on a Saturday, and they've gone home early and done whatever else they need to do. But
thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Councillor, go on.
I'll ignore it, Madam Mayor, as my mum says. Ignore the ignorant. That doesn't mean, Madam Mayor, that we shouldn't be looking to how we keep people and retain them in the town centre and make things better. But, Madam Mayor, all of this today would have been much better if they'd been putting it to their Tory pals at the County Council and indeed their Tory MP for Bedworth. The leader of this council, Madam Mayor, and the Tory leader of Warwickshire County Council are well aware of my representations as a councillor for Bede Ward that represents the town centre regarding the essential improvements that are needed for Bedworth Town Centre. At least Councillor Jackson has accompanied me around Bedworth, and we have also met on a number of occasions. Councillor Jackson has assured me of her commitment to make the required improvements. Madam Mayor, this is more positive than the refusal of the Tory leader of the County Council to meet me in Bedworth. And it may be useful for a bit of history, Madam Mayor. Bedworth actually used to be part of the old Fosal Urban District Council. And I guess in 1974, if people had been consulted then, as they are now, they would have probably preferred to have stayed in with Coventry and Fosal Urban District Council. It's just a thing, and there's still any number of people from Fosal come and visit Bedworth as well for their shopping, etc. So we should be encouraging all that. But as I say, there's positive moves for Bedworth Town Centre. I'm sure Councillor Jackson is happy to stand up and say how much I get onto her about it, as well as to the officers. So we look forward to those improvements being made. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you very much. I wanted to bring some unity and make this less political. We should actually try and do what we can for Bedworth, and a bid for Bedworth has got various problems, one of which is actually having a sound business case, and a sound business case is best developed by the people from Bedworth, which is why a Bedworth Town Council or a Bedworth bid or people in Bedworth should be thinking of ideas and given the funding, the seeding to do it. It's not right for me, and I'm not skilled at knowing what goes on in Bedworth, although I do visit Bedworth incredibly regularly now, particularly I'm trying to do the park run most Saturdays, and I cycle through Bedworth quite often. I see Bedworth and I see the empty high street. I go into Home Bargains, which is rammed with people, and I think one of the problems Bedworth has got is the Home Bargains, the Aldi and the Tesco's, and people not going out of those three shops. So I see the problems it's got, and I think rather than go this sort of Bedworth exit sort of campaign, we want independence, we're not being treated fairly, what we should try and do is say, we have these issues in Bedworth, we think we're being overlooked, we know there's differences and problems between a large town and a smaller town, and try and work out how we put in a bid in future for Bedworth that works. And I do think we need the support of our MPs in this, because the existing high street funds and all these funds are really targeted at cities and large towns. They want to do these 100 towns or 50 towns. And if you look at places the size of Bedworth, there are 1,000 Bedworths around the country, there are 100 Nuneatons and there are 50 cities. Yeah. The smaller the place, the more there are of them. And that makes it difficult because you've got to make up a bid, and that takes a lot of money and a lot of resources. And so you need a scheme modified to actually help the smaller towns have a high street fund. So there's less bureaucracy, you need to employ less consultants, and it's a bit of a lighter scheme. So I will be supporting this, and I wish it wasn't so political between Labour and Tories. We all, I hope, are passionate about our town being successful. And our town is successful, and our borough and the other town is successful, in Bedworth, wherever you live. Our borough is successful because we're trying to make the whole place successful. And every part of the borough that's successful generates business rates, generates livelihoods, and makes the whole place better. And I'm particularly happy about what's going on in Attleborough, because there you're not spending a lot of money, but you've got Attleborough trying to get more footfall. And we should be doing the low-cost things as well as the expensive government bids. And there's also a lot of politics in this, in terms of we've got 25 million, we've got this. We haven't got anything yet. We've got the opportunity in Nuneaton to get 25 million. And I do hope we actually don't waste that opportunity. I do hope the Nuneaton bids are successful, and actually, like the problems we have arguing for 3 years over Europe, we won't spend 3 years arguing over Nuneaton and Bedworth, but actually as a borough we'll try and get all parts of Nuneaton and Bedworth as successful as they can be, while being realistic that we cannot have billions of pounds of success in Bedworth. We have to have a realistic plan to make it a really successful small town and work out what happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to my Bees Ward neighbours for allowing. It is high in Bedworth for applying for this fund. I understand the reasons for the Nuneaton First strategy, but many in Bedworth and Bolkington resent it and feel like second-class citizens in this borough. We hear this in our communities online and offline, and I do see where they're coming from, whilst also understanding that the reasons learned from transforming Nuneaton will benefit Bedworth when we go through the same process. One of the top priorities from residents and friends of my ward is regenerating Bedworth Town Centre and bringing business back to the town. We've already got the ball rolling from the county end, starting with training courses late last year for businesses in Bedworth, followed by networking and overtures from to the Borough Council from the county regarding setting up a business improvement district. And Craig Tracy, our local MP, has also made the borough aware of the future High Street Fund and also made the case for proper block paving in the town centre. Tory pals helping Bedworth, as they always do, all year round, not just at election time. We've heard promises tonight that we are applying next year for the future High Street Fund, so let's coordinate with our county's business initiatives, as has already happened with transforming Nuneaton, and reaffirm our United to Achieve motto so that Bedworth is not and never is left behind.
Thank you. Councillor Pandya.
Mayor, I don't want to repeat again and again whatever Chris Wilson, Sab Gran and Kyle Evans said. We would like to regenerate Bedworth because at the moment many businesses are closing down. And we would like to rejuvenate this Bedworth Centre. And although the leader has already promised, but we want to again promise that the next bid of will be done in 2020 for the favour of Bedworth. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm a bit surprised that this keeps going on and on and on, because we all agree in this chamber that we should always look for the betterment of Bedworth as well as Nuneaton and, of course, Bilkington, and not to forget Kersley, of course. But I've lived in the borough since 1965, and the biggest change has been what I'm sure we've all got in our hands, these things. Now, if we can turn around and do something different from the new setup, we've been promised that we shall go into the next round in order to try and assist and help Bedworth with the Bedworth initiative. Great. We shouldn't have arguments across the chamber tonight. We're all in favour of helping each other. But no, people want to turn around and get this Nuneaton Bedworth thing up and running again. How the people from Treacletown, etc., etc. That, we don't look at that on this side. We look at it as a borough as a whole. Nuneaton was the first one, Bedworth will be the second one. And I'm fed up hearing the Tories saying things about what they're doing in Bedworth. When they have their meetings in Bedworth with their MP, do they ever ask any other Bedworth councillors to attend? No. It's insular, it's defeatist, and it should be open to everybody to attend these meetings, not just a cabal of so-called Tory Bedworth councillors. Because as we know, there are particular problems in the market. We've tried to deal with that over the years. We've had various different things happening in Bedworth to the betterment of Bedworth. The Bedworth Park, absolutely wonderful, where people can go and do various things which they can't particularly do in Nuneaton. There are things that's happening. And as somebody who lives in Bedworth, as a leader, as a portfolio holder Ian Lloyd, we know the problems in Bedworth, and we've got to work together, united to achieve, in order to get a better borough, including a better Bedworth. I'm all in favour of this. We shouldn't keep blethering on about this all night. We're all in favour of it.
Mr. Phillips.
I'm speechless, really. Yeah, it might be lucky. The leader has promised on numerous occasions and made the statement that Bedworth will be considered for the second round. What is the problem? Why the talk about the division between Bedworth and Nuneaton? I know why. Everybody knows why. There's an election coming. So let's divide. That's what you're saying. Oh, Bedworth doesn't get this, Bedworth doesn't get that. Believe me, on this side, Bedworth councillors fight very, very hard and get a lot of time what they want. Austerity in this country has brought Bedworth down, apart from the phones, which is a diary. It's in the other pocket. It's in here somewhere. There you go. I'm not like John, keep it up there. The town centres have been run down. You just won't accept that what the leader says is what's going to happen. Move the vote. I think we've had enough debate. Move the vote, Madam.
I have two further speakers. 1, 2, 3 further speakers. I have 3 further speakers, and then I intend to move to the vote. They are Councillor Llewellyn Nash, Councillor Lloyd, and Councillor Rudkin. Councillor Llewellyn Nash.
It's been very interesting tonight to listen to councillors opposite talking about the town where I live, Bedworth. There are lots of excuses that have been mentioned tonight. One, the mobile phone. Yes, shopping on the internet is on the increase, but it's also levelling out. Why? Because the shopkeeper and the customers are finding that actually they want more independence. They're fed up with the big Tesco's, the B&M's, the home bargains. They want independent shops, and that isn't just Bedworth, that isn't just Nuneaton, that's nationally. The other thing, which I think has been the main detriment to Bedworth, which hasn't just been for the last couple of years, but has been continual for about 10, 15 years, the rundown of Bedworth, is because my colleagues opposite continually put the rents up. So actually, shops can't afford to pay the rent to run their shops. One of our jewel in the crowns in Bedworth has shut. It was a very nice shop and had a commission place in there. There were lots of lovely cards, different things that people actually want. But he found he had to close the shop because he really couldn't afford to run that shop anymore, and so he's gone to another part of Warwickshire where he had his other shop, which the other town is really proud of. So we have lots of empty shops, and the business people, it's not for want of businesses coming to Bedworth. As soon as they hear about the rents, they don't want to know. And so we have got a town centre which continually, every week, every month, loses a shop. And I have to say, it's the opposition opposite that has caused that with the high rents. People want to shop in towns. People want to see the high street grow again. But poor Bedworth can't do that because you guys won't bring down the rent.
Councillor Jackson.
Madam Mayor, I think some of the comments Councillor Ellen Nash has made are factually incorrect. Rents for every shop in that area, and some of the locations she's talked about, I believe, are in private ownership.
So, Councillor Lloyd.
I've got to say, right, in my working life, I didn't go into Bedworth that often because I was at work during the day, so I never got into the town centre that often. Since I became ill and then retired, more and more I go into Bedworth town centre during the day. It's either that or watch daytime telly, and if anybody's seen daytime telly, it's more ridiculous than what's going on here now with this debate between these two different parties here, claiming this, that and the other. We should all be one. Councillor Jackson has said on numerous occasions, has been said, that we will put a bid in. Ain't a problem. We will put a bid in for Bedworth. We will work to get better shops, better facilities in Bedworth. I go up there during the day and I don't see all these empty shops that they've been talking about. OK, at times, because of my health, I have to go round on a mobility scooter for the first time in my life. But I see all the shops. And the only ones I see empty that I can see are the ones that are not owned by this council. Thornton's, I believe, is private. So it's not us that put the rent up. I believe. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. So I get into the town centre a lot more. One thing I do notice, whether I'm walking on a mobility scooter or in a car, those blessed blocks rattle wherever you go. Even walking, rattle. And whosever responsibility is, and I know it's the County Council's responsibility, they should be done. Not next month, not next year, now. Now, they should be done. But the problem we've got is, it's like on the furnishings that are put up, the black railings, the nice black posts. I remember them going in. We painted them. The Borough Council put a lot of the fancy railings in. But now the counties took over the highways again. Now, correct me wrong, but I got told this week by a councillor that where the barriers by the bus stops have been smashed down or broken down and run into, Warwickshire County Council will only put bog standard up, they won't put light for light. They won't put it in. So they're only putting bog standard in. We don't work with the furnishings anymore because we handed it back to the Highway Authority at their request. So, at the end of the day, Madam Mayor, we shouldn't be jumping up and down in here, shouting at each other. We should be doing. And this is ridiculous having this motion. OK, the motion's got a debate going or some sort of debate going. But there was already an agreement in here by the two major parties. I'm sure the third party and the Greens agree that something has to be done with Bedworth. And it will be done. As has been promised by the leader, we will put in the High Street Fund when it comes up. Nuneaton has been lucky. They put in a lot of hard work by our officers for the High Street Fund. And they've ended up, because there's extra cash been put in by the government, they've got it. It's there. Brilliant. We want the same for Bedworth as well. And it's all right everybody jumping up and down saying, I represent Bedworth Ward and I live in Bedworth. So do I live in Bedworth. I've lived in Bedworth all my life, other than the bit I lived in Kersley. But all my life I've lived in Bedworth. So, you know, I feel the same, that we do need to move forward with Bedworth. We do need to get things going. Why are we having this arguments and to and fro's and shouting and throwing back and forward when we're all in agreement? I agree. We just move the vote. You're wasting our time now, just doing this here and now, because all we're doing is arguing back and forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The final.
Agree that this is. I fully support this motion. I've lived in Bedworth all my life. Of course, I want the best for Bedworth, and I could assure residents of Bedworth that myself and Councillor Hancock meet with the leader of the council regularly about Bedworth. We're constantly lobbying for the best for Bedworth, and if I was invited to a meeting with the MP, I would be happy to attend. And please, I'm sure Councillor Hancock will be the same. I personally can speak for myself. I'd be invited to attend. We do need to work together. So I will be fully supporting this motion and fully supporting the bid in 2020. Thank you. Move to the vote, please.
Councillor Rudkin. Councillor Wilson, as mover of the notice of motion, you have the right to reply.
Thanks I have actually from this motion tonight is that A, we tried, well, most, with some honourable exceptions over the other side, actually tried to shut down the debate, and B, that the other side actually brought up no ideas whatsoever about how we can actually improve Bedworth or what we want to see in Bedworth moving forward. Now, when I drive down the A444 and I see the water tower, I know I'm nearly home. It's actually quite heartwarming. If you see the water tower, you know you're nearly home. But we haven't heard about putting more of a mixture of housing into the town centre, which we so desperately need, both in Nuneaton and Bedworth, actually, because if you have people living in the town centre, they're far more likely to use facilities, they're far more likely to use the local shops and want to look after the area. We haven't heard about, perhaps, a greater mix of office facilities, because all there is really is the major office facility is the county council. But do other businesses want to have office facilities in Bedworth? Because they do actually have some connectivity with the Bedworth railway station right over the road from the main town centre. We haven't heard, like we have heard in Nuneaton, about possibly looking at more cafe and cultural issues within the town centres. I am sure that residents both in Nuneaton and in Bedworth would love to see those changes in their town centres, and I'm sure, I know Lubbs will mention it again, we would like to see something similar in Borkington too. But what I will not stand for, Madam Mayor, is borderline hypocrisy when we hear about members not being invited to meet with the MPs. I've been involved with the Conservative Party on this side for nigh on 15 years now, both as a councillor and within the group beforehand. And I cannot remember a single instance where Mike O'Brien, the then Labour MP, invited any Conservative councillors to discussions about the future of Bedworth Town Centre. both the late councillors Jim O'Brien and Barry Lobbett and Damon Brown in his first iteration on this council, they were never invited. So let's not play false flag on this issue. You're trying to create issues where they don't exist, and we're playing by your own rules. What's more interesting, actually, is what we intend to do with Bedworth and moving forward. And that has been woefully lacking. We've heard nothing from the controlling group about what's going to happen in Bedworth and what we want to do. I've got the right of reply. There's no more speakers, I believe. We could have had a fantastic debate on Bedworth, and I was hoping that members would be able to use this opportunity, perhaps to raise kernels of ideas that the portfolio holders and the officers can go back away with while they're looking at this business case for Bedworth and the plans for Bedworth, to actually say, we have listened to some local residents and indeed councillors and residents from the gallery, and these are ideas, can we explore them? We heard nothing except trying to shut down debate, except for a few honourable exceptions. And that is really the main story behind this debate tonight that we've had on Bedworth, that no one really wanted to discuss the future of Bedworth. I do, because I actually have a foot in both camps. I might live in Nuneaton, but a large part of my childhood and going forward was spent in Bedworth. Indeed, my great-grandmother lived in Bedworth until she passed away 7 years ago. So I am actually passionate about Bedworth too, because it has so much potential, just like Nuneaton has potential, but we have untapped it for so long, and now we need to pop that cork and let it flow. So let's vote for this motion, and actually in the future, when we debate these issues, don't try and shut them down, actually talk about ideas, because that's what the people in the gallery and the people in the streets want to see.
Vote on this, Madam.
We have had a request for a recorded vote, so although sorry, I forgot that I already had a proposal to move to the vote earlier before we took the final three speakers. All those in favour of moving to the vote? Thank you. We will now move to a recorded vote.
Okay, again, indicate for or against the motion, please. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Brinley Edwards. Councillor Brown's apologies. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane's apologies. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox. Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longden, apologies. Councillor Pandare. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins. And Councillor Wilson.
The vote is unanimous.
Theme here about Bedworth, and actually the Civic Hall is an ideal opportunity to give a cultural heart, not only Bedworth but the rest of the borough. But unfortunately, one of the things that we are seeing time and time again is that despite having an approved budget from this council, which has been voted upon, it has, not once in my 10 years as a councillor, actually stuck to budget. Now, we've talked about traders tonight in Bedworth and elsewhere. If a trader was to operate a business like we currently do with the Bedworth Civic Hall, they would be insolvent. because there is no default position. Whereas with the Civic Hall, the default position is the bank of the taxpayer. And that is not sustainable. What we need to do, and I am extremely keen to see, is that we put the Civic Hall into a 21st century frame of operation and actually make it fit for the next generation moving forward to be able to enjoy it. And before I get decried about this from members opposite, I actually have fond memories of the Civic Hall too, because I performed on that stage on numerous occasions with music, and I have very fond memories, and I know the power and influence and opportunity that the Civic Hall can provide to young people in the arts, and particularly in music. And that was one of my great passions growing up, and it still is, and I have very fond memories. But what I also have to have a responsibility for as a politician, as someone who approves budgets and votes on them, is that we must make sure we are using council taxpayers' money wisely. And I honestly, hand on heart, can't say at the moment that we are spending every single penny piece that goes into the Civic Hall wisely, because it is not operating to its approved budget. We hear about moving things here and moving things there within the budget, but always when we look at the financial statements, there is a discrepancy between the approved budget and what it actually uses. Now, that is not to take away from the hard work of the staff there. But what we need to do is bring in significant experience in the private sector of those who actually run theatres and arts houses and those sorts of facilities to actually make sure that the Civic Hall is doing what it says, which is art with a heart. But it also has to be art that operates within its budget. And what this motion says is we need to go back to basics. We need to actually get someone in, funded through using an allocated general reserves general fund, and actually say, go through this place top to bottom, from the highest person to the person on the lowest pay scale, look at every single department within the Civic Hall and make sure it is working properly and for the 21st century. Because a lot of the ethos around the Civic Hall has been mired in the 20th century. Indeed, many times I've sat here in this chamber and in committee and been told, oh, when it was set up 50-odd years ago before we moved over to the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, it was designed to do this. It was because we didn't have a symphony hall. We used to have to, I believe it was Councillor Haynes at the time, who told me that they used to have to put the orchestras on down at Nicholas Chamberlain. Now, that was the 1970s. We are now in 2019, and we have to catch up with the times. If the Birmingham Hippodrome operated like this, they'd go bust. If the Belgrade operated like this, we'd go bust. Indeed, if you ask Joe Bloggs Limited on the High Street, if they operated like this, they would go bust. And in the current financial circumstances that this council faces, and I am not decrying that because I have spent 9 years doing shadow budgets with Simone and her team, I know full well some of the financial constraints which are operated in. But we would be ignorant and derelict, and it would be a dereliction of our duty if we did not look at the single biggest expenditure of this council, which is the Civic Hall. Now, it might be that it needs to have its budget adjusted, it might need more money. It might not. But what I need is reassurance from those who actually know the job, who have experience in the private sector and actually running a business, that it can do its job. At the moment, it can't. And indeed, I believe Councillor Evans tried to move something, an audit, to actually ask that this be looked at. But I believe it was turned down from memory when I looked at the minutes. That's not a way to conduct a council. Let's get them in and let's make sure we're fit for purpose.
Councillor Wilson, is there a seconder for the proposal? Councillor Evans.
Formally second the motion that's been proposed by Councillor Wilson. And first of all, I'd like to put on record my personal thanks to the frontline staff at the Civic Hall, the waiters, the people who work behind the bar, in the chefs, the door keepers, for the fantastic work they do. They work very hard, and I know that as a regular at the Civic Hall bistro, I have, shown to admit it, a full English once a week or two.
and they cook it beautifully, and the staff serve it in a very nice way as well. But in my opinion, if the Civic Hall was a privately run firm, it would have gone bust. It would have gone bankrupt, and it would have gone bankrupt many years ago. Since 2009, we've spent £5.5 million to run the Civic Hall, and that equates to just over £500,000 every financial year. That's despite council tax going up and Labour introducing the green bin tax. Every single financial year, the Civic Hall is unable to stick to the budget, meaning taxpayers in this borough have to keep bailing out the venue. But our policy is absolutely clear. We have no intentions whatsoever of closing the Civic Hall. In fact, we're the ones who want to save it. And that's why I'm delighted to announce today that the Bedworth Conservatives will be launching a campaign to save the Civic Hall from Labour's financial mismanagement. If the Civic Hall was run properly, it would make a profit, as does every entertainment venue. The council's financial position would be in a far better position, and perhaps, if it was run properly 10 years ago, perhaps today we wouldn't have a green bin tax for our residents. And perhaps we could have more money being spent in Bedworth Town Centre if the Civic Hall was being run properly. It was in the Cabinet papers last week. It was stated that we're expected to lose £18,000 on the Civic Hall bar service. How on earth can you lose money on a bar? It's a bar. You should be able to make a profit on a bar. It's not difficult. We need to open the bar after shows, and why not after performances make an announcement at the end of the show saying our bar is open for the next few years. Come and have a drink before you go home. On 2 occasions now, I've attempted to move recommendations, firstly to the Audit and Standards Committee, and then to full council for a procedural motion, to have the council's internal audit team look into what's happening with the Civic Hall, and possibly even provide ways as to how the Civic Hall can start to make a profit. But on both occasions, I'm afraid the Labour group voted to stop this from happening. And I'm afraid by voting against a recommendation for your own internal team to conduct an investigation, as a councillor, I've got to ask questions as that. I mean, you would expect you'd be okay for your own internal team to conduct an investigation, and it kind of implies to me that really you're actually just worried about what would come back in such an internal investigation. And that's why the Conservative group have no other alternative but to recommend that external auditors from KPMG or PwC or wherever come in and look at the Civic Hall, top to bottom, and its management, so we can protect the Civic Hall and ensure it survives for future generations. My predecessor on this council, Tony Lloyd, who I have a lot of respect for what it's worth after the way Labour treated him a few years ago, always said the Civic Hall is the jewel of Bedworth's crown. Well, he said something vaguely similar. I wouldn't agree with him entirely, but he's absolutely right that it's a vital asset to Bedworth and the town centre economy. We need it to open, but it is a non-discretionary service that the council offers, and the Labour group are putting that into jeopardy. Why don't we get in professional people to look in how we can improve the service so it starts to make a profit? I know our local MP, Craig Tracy, before he was an MP, he was actually a trustee on the Lichfield Garrick Theatre, which was a theatre run by the Lichfield District Council. And that's been completely turned around after professional people have come in and made recommendations to the council as to how it can improve. And Councillor Wilson is absolutely right. We need to move with the times. We no longer live in the 1990s, and not everyone in Bedworth enjoys going to see Elvis tribute acts. We need to widen the Civic Hall and its appeal to younger people like myself. And I hope members will vote in favour of the recommendation this evening to allow for the external auditors to come in and save the Civic Hall for future generations. Let's keep it open and save it.
Panda.
Mayor, Bedworth Civic Hall is a jewel in the Bedworth town. This is not run like business. We can't keep on subsidizing this project, and we want to save this from bankruptcy. Financial mismanagement had led to the Civic Hall costing 5.5 million since 2009. That is nearly $500,000 every year, which is all taxpayers' money. We don't want to close the Civic Hall. We want to save the putting into the professional, fit for purpose, business and reforming management. So I couldn't understand why, since 2019, they're losing every year, but the audit has not been done. I just want to ask why it's so much. It's not 1 year, 2 years, it's 9 or 10 years losing money, but nobody looking after that. Why is doing this thing? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, there we have it, don't we? I don't know how we managed to get green bins in, but it was in there, saying about, you know, if we hadn't put the charges on there, we could have more of the Civic Hall. Let's remind people, it's the 60% cuts from the Tory government that has put us all into these positions. Madam Mayor, this, if you want to get a quick start into getting people into Civic Hall, repair the rattling block paving. Councillor Grant's told us the county's going to do it. I'll tell you what, nobody else knows about it. Madam Mayor, all this is a smokescreen to implement the Tory plans to close or privatise the Civic Hall. We've just heard them mention it. Privatise it. Somebody said if it's private and losing money, they'd shut it. They want to shut it or privatise it. The Tories on this council, Madam Mayor, have always been jealous that the Civic Hall's in Bedworth. If they could get wheels under the Civic Hall, Madam Mayor, they'd have it down Nuneaton. My understanding, Madam Mayor, is that the budget for the Civic Hall, like all areas of the council, are already audited by external auditors. Those auditors have always shown those budgets to be robust. So I don't see any need, well, that external audit is already there within our budgets. So once again, there's no need for this to come forward tonight, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Go on.
Councillor Hancock's implied that I said I wanted no such thing. And, in fact, the cameras will testify that. I said that at Lichfield Garrick Theatre, which is run by Lichfield District Council, people from the entertainment industry came into the council and told them good ways how to run it. If you want to have a look online, it will be on there. But I, for one, did not say we should privatise it, and I will reiterate, if there's any proposal from any single member in this council, whether they're Labour, Tory, Green or Independent, to close the Civic Hall, I, for one, will be the first to vote against it.
Well, had you finished, Councillor Hunt?
I had finished
right.
this point of
Continue,
clarification.
Yes.
Just to clarify something I've said.
Personal explanation.
OK, personal explanation. Madam Mayor, Councillor Evans has jumped up there, as he usually does, being patronising to myself, and he clearly didn't listen to what I said. I never mentioned Councillor Evans by name. A couple of members have mentioned about privatisation.
Thank you. Councillor Walmsley.
I'll hold, Madam Mayor, if you could. Thank you. Rise actually is someone who is a massive lover of the arts, and as Councillor Wilson and Councillor Golby and Councillor Evans can attest, I'm regularly seen quoting from a show tune or other, and someone that actually loves going to the theatre, particularly musicals and encore radio in the office. For those that don't know, specialist musical theatre radio, very, very worthwhile. But unlike Councillor Hancock's, I actually believe in facts. So perhaps we can reverse this debate back to one of facts. And the fact is that this council, our budget a year is roughly £15 million is what we spend, give or take. And given that we still refuse to use the £1.5 million new home bonus towards general spending every day, which would be a 10% increase immediately, we need to look at every penny that we spend. And the fact is that over the past 10 years, there has been a roughly £5.3 million public subsidy from every taxpayer in our borough to keeping the borough afloat. Now, if you average that down the year, that's approximately, the Civic Hall afloat. If you average that down every year, that's roughly £530,000 per annum. You compare that to our budget, that's 4% of our council spend. 4% of what we spend goes to subsidising a business, or what should be a business, that actually takes money from people. We sell tickets to the theatre, whether that be we sell them and we take the money from it, or whether we sell them in block to a company that comes and buys the entire block, and then they sell the tickets for the profits. We also sell food and drink as part of that, and we have a bar that's open, or supposedly open during performances. So how we can be spending 4% of the money of which we spend on all of our services on bailing out this organisation without actually asking ourselves, let's get someone in, let's get the auditors in to review it. Because for me, a 4% spend over £500,000 a year subsidy requires us to be looking at this with absolute microscopic detail. We need to look at all the elements of the Civic Hall which cost us money, which bring money in, and why are those two not matching out? Why are those two not balancing? I too have made many performances at the Civic Hall in music, and also I think my Leavers celebration for school was held there. And one of the things that strikes me is that it's great to be putting on those shows, it's great to be putting on commercial shows, but we need to be making sure that as a sum total, what we are doing with the Civic Hall at least wipes its face, and frankly shouldn't be difficult to be making a profit. You know, we've talked earlier, we talked about the MRF, which could potentially bring some revenue into the council. We've looked at the NABSEL, which looks to bring revenue into the council. So why are we not putting that same microscope of independent audit onto something that costs us over £500,000 a year, when actually, why couldn't it bring us in £500,000 a year? That is all that this motion simply wants to do. That is the facts of this motion, unlike the bluster from Councillor Hancock's as always. The reality is, let's get the Civic Hall on an even footing, and then let's look to make it even better. Let's strive to get in performances, more performances. Let's strive to bring in more revenue, and actually let's make a profit so that actually this can be returned to being a jewel in the crown for this council, because sadly at the moment, with the current losses, with the amount we're having to subsidise every year, it could potentially turn into a millstone. Thank you.
Councillor Condacourt.
I used to go to Civic Hall with my wife quite a bit. We haven't actually been attracted by much on the programme like Councillor Evans. It hasn't really been the sort of thing we want to go and see. So I think it's important to work out why we're not putting on the right performances for some of our communities. Also, it keeps talking over on that side and various members about it making a profit. We need to distinguish between the running costs and the turnover like that and actually the £700,000 budget, because about half of that is actually things like capital charges, depreciation and all those stuff that gets lumped onto a business. And the Civic Hall will never turn over enough money to cover both the operating costs, the £250,000, various other charges, and the effective cost of building the building and recover that cost. That is a sunk cost. So when you look at the accounts, there's a budget for the Civic Hall, which is about £700,000. There's staff costs and things, which is about £250,000. There's £300,000-ish of capital charges or whatever. So we need to get our terminology right and think about what we're trying to do. And it is realistic and sensible to get the day-to-day income and expenditure matching, so that when you put a show on, you make a profit from the show. But actually, we need to be careful with our language that we're not actually taking the budget to Civic Hall down to zero. If you look at the 4% that Councillor Walmsley talked about, 2% is all the charges and recharges, and 2% is actually the running costs and those things. So we need to get our language right, and I think it would be good to have an OSC meeting where actually someone goes through the accounts of Civic Hall and separates out income and expenditure. One of the big things the Civic Hall lacks is actually income. I mentioned it's got about £250,000 in all the staffing costs and all those sort of things, but it seems to have about £100,000 income. It is a shocking lack of income that is our problem, rather than how much it costs to employ staff or whatever. We aren't getting the people through the doors, and we're running less and less shows, which actually saves you money a bit on your staff costs, but then makes the income even less. If you're looking at raising £500,000 a year, and you only open 100 days a year, that's trying to take in £5,000 a day. And it depends whether you're trying to do that on top of all the running costs. So I think we need to understand the economics of it, not dream that it can be a profit centre, but dream that actually shows can be profitable. So we talk about auditing. Auditors do different things, and what we actually want at this recommendation, I think, is a value for money audit. We're not accusing anyone of fiddling the figures. What we're saying is we need an audit to see whether this thing is run efficiently. Yeah, where you spend your money. The process needs auditing, not the actual adding up the numbers. And the council's audit and grant form, that's right, when they sign off the accounts, that's signing off that no one's stealing money from the accounts or giving out free tickets for favours. So it's a different sort of audit. It's a value for money audit, and I think it'd be a very useful process. One of the things I've always wanted to do at Civic Hall is separate out the things like the bar and things, because I know the museum doesn't cause us any problems for the coffee shop there, because it's a franchise. It runs, he sets his prices. There's an element of him working out how he runs the coffee shop, and whether he does an opening, whether he does an offer on tea cakes, that isn't our problem because it's a franchise. So I do think we need to separate out at Civic Hall the things of selling drinks and teas and ice creams from putting on the shows. And arts will always be difficult, because if you want to do the right sort of arts to actually be a benefit to the borough, they won't always be the most profitable. And a lot of arts venues need public subsidy. The fact is you need the public subsidy to be as low as possible, and for every pound you put in, you get one person visiting a show. At the moment, if you did the sums, like we did the sums for the climbing wall, we are probably spending £20 for everyone going to see a £10 show. We need to get the ratios right. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Condacourt, I have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more speakers, and then after Councillor Wilson has given his right to reply, I intend to go to the vote. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash.
I've got some very fond memories of Bedworth Civic Hall. Who remembers Bottom Moon? The children's programme. My daughter was really glad to go and see them live. I missed a Pink Floyd concert, so my kids bought me tickets to go and see a tribute act at Bedworth Civic Hall. That was absolutely excellent. And I had friends that used to go and have their full English there sometimes on market days in Bedworth as well. And not only that, but Canon Maggs and Canon Evans used to put on fantastic pupil shows, didn't they, at the end of term? So I've got some very fond memories of the Civic Hall. But since 2009, sad to say that the Bedworth Civic Hall has lost £5.5 million of local taxpayers' money, and that is really sad. Every financial year, the Civic Hall has not been able to stick to its budget, and the people have had to continually bail it out. Bedworth does not want, and I'm sure Nuneaton does not want to see the Civic Hall close. So as representatives of Bedworth, we're going to start a campaign to save the Civic Hall. The Bedworth Civic Hall is set to lose £18,000 alone on just the bar service. The bar, normally in an evening's entertainment venue, is the one place that you would expect to make a profit, but it isn't. The people of Bedworth and Nuneaton deserve more value for money. Excuse me. So this we as Conservative councillors would like to request that we have the external auditors in and take a look at the Civic Hall management team as well as all the ongoing finances. The Civic Hall is an asset to Bedworth and the town's economy, and it's very sad to see its gradual demise. It would be great if all members could vote in favour and the recommendation to allow the external auditors to come in and save the Civic Hall.
Councillor Graham.
Figures from the Borough Council are troubling for members, but above all my residents who pay the taxes that keep the Civic Hall running. For over a decade, £500,000 deficits have been commonplace at the Civic Hall, which leads residents to question how long the Civic Hall can stay open under the Borough Council's current leadership. The employees also deserve peace of mind and job security, and this is especially true since non-discretionary services are often the most vulnerable. Therefore, we have requested auditing, review and hopefully a solution to the ongoing financial situation so that future generations can benefit from this one-of-a-kind venue that we've all grown up with. We should learn from the Belgrade and similar locations, and we want our descendants to enjoy the pantomimes, plays, tribute acts and wrestling and all sorts of great events we host. I say we should support all the arts. I'll even see that Elvis tribute act. So please let's all agree to bring in an external auditor to help us understand where we're going wrong. I worry for the future of the Civic Hall when there are such huge budget deficits each year, and I hope that we can turn the ship around so that we can restore this unique, magnificent venue to its former strength. Thank you.
I think we should actually set up another group to protect the Civic Hall from the Tories. Because in the past years they've either wanted to shut it down or they wanted to, and Jim O'Brien's name's been mentioned, wanted to turn it into offices for a town council or something he was rabbiting on about. So anyway, that goes way back. I remember the Civic Hall, and still, in fact, I think myself and Councillor Hancock are down as the people that most tweeted in 1 week about what happened at the Civic Hall. I remember when the Spinners, remember the Spinners? They used to be at Nickel, and then they went to the Civic Hall, and I remember going to both their farewell concerts. The first one was that good, they had to have a second one. I remember going when I was mayor, inviting the rest of the chain gang along to the Civic Hall for a performance, and in those days we were talking about boundary changes, etc., and I said to the Lord Mayor of Coventry, I said, anywhere in Bedworth that you would want to be part of Coventry, and he circled the Civic Hall. We know the value of the Civic Hall. You know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. And what I would like to ask, I could stand corrected here, and very few times I do that, but wasn't in the Tories' budget this year to close the Civic Hall 2 days a week, and then they've got the cheek to turn around and say, save the Civic Hall. Yes, save it from them.
Councillor Tromans.
A couple of things that have come out of the debate that I'd like to clear up first of all. The auditors, our auditors as the council, they tell us what a good job Simone and others do, adding up the sums and keeping a tally. They do not sign off on the political spending decisions of the Labour group, and the fact that Labour members keep saying that to mislead the public is very much to your shame. As far as knowing the price of everything and the value of nothing, I look over there and it seems, from all the things we've debated tonight, the constant thread of mismanagement, of not knowing how much this is worth, not knowing how much that will cost. you know neither know the price nor the value of anything. You are at sea. You're lost. You probably mean well, some of you, but you're way out of your depth. This smacks of paucity of ambition, that the Civic Hall is some kind of, sick business that has to be constantly propped up, that Bedworth Town Centre, it's difficult for that, and all the paucity of ambition. That's what I'm hearing all around. The Civic Hall could be magnificent. It could be making us money. Frankly, if it just cost us an awful lot less, that would be a major step forward. And even more importantly, it would have contributed more to the cultural life and to the economy of Bedworth and the borough. These are lost opportunities. And when I see people that just don't want to hear, that just want to keep on handing over money because they can just about afford to do it in the budget each year, even though they keep putting on green bin taxes and stuff to pay for it, it tells me that they're just afraid. They just don't understand what it will take to sort these things out. And you know what? You haven't got to. All we're saying in our motion is get some people in who do know what they're doing, just for a change. Because based on the track record of this council with any major undertaking, the public have no confidence. You've only got the overspend next door, Gresham Road, the astonishing lack of business acumen when it came to the climbing wall. Face it, you're not up to it. The very least you can do is vote through a motion that gets external people in who can help us save the Civic Hall, who can help it create jobs, create some more prosperity for the borough, do a much better service for the residents, and stop being a £500,000+ strain on precious taxpayer resources. Thank you.
My point of order, with your permission, Madam Mayor, is it is 5 to 9. In line with the Constitution, could I move that we suspend standing orders to enable business tonight to be concluded?
As you know, within the Constitution, when we talked about members' questions, we said that members' questions would be asked if the meeting didn't go on after 9 o'clock. I am prepared to suspend standing orders until we have finished the notices of motion. Could I have a vote on moving standard orders until we have finished the notices of motion? Is there a seconder, please? All those in favour? And those against? That is... Councillor Golby. So what's happening? What's happening? Sorry, continue. Sorry, Councillor.
I'm just rising to put a bit of clarification onto a few points that have been raised. There is a bar franchise, it's across the road, it's called Witherspoons, because our bar's never open, so that's where everybody else ends up. The way that the finances have been discussed, the figures that we've got have actually come from senior finance officers. So I can tell Councillor Condacor that everything you mentioned has already been taken into account in everything. So I'll just repeat that because my microphone seems to have gone funny again. The finances have come from senior finance officers, so we do know they're accurate. Everything is taken into account, including income and expenditure. And the net result is that over the last 10 years, and bearing in mind this is when we are constantly hearing about austerity from the Labour group and 60% cuts and whatever else, that it's the direct cost to the taxpayer of this borough has been £5,380,019. Now, you can find that in austerity, in times of austerity, and you keep complaining about the times of austerity, and yet you are refusing to get anybody in to review why this business is costing the borough taxpayers, not us, the taxpayers, this much money. We've given you the opportunity on a couple of occasions now to review what's going on We're asking for an external auditor to conduct a detailed review. I think £5 million in, you should be asking for that yourselves. It shouldn't take us to stand here and try and put your arm up your back to get an auditor in. And again, with what Councillor Trommonson said, the auditor that comes in actually signs off the money as being spent, not dodgy, for want of a better word, not the fact that you're spending it and you're spending it well. Clearly, we are spending it on the Civic Hall. We're spending it quite a lot, but that's not well. If it was any other business, like has been mentioned several times, it would have gone bankrupt years ago. I mean, these figures that I've got go back to 2009-2010 budget year, and in that year alone, it cost the taxpayer a direct subsidy of over £600,000. Now, this is nothing new. This has been going on year on year on year. So it's about time that we actually said, OK, let's have a look at where we're going wrong on this. Let's find out where the money's going. Why is it costing us this much? Why is the income and expenditure not matching up? Even if you take away depreciation and things like that, it's still going to cost us a lot of money. And the other thing that's been brought up by Councillor Glass about us trying to close the Civic Hall, well, it actually goes into something that Councillor Condacourt said. We looked at the day-to-day costs of the Civic Hall. When we made the suggestions that we made, it was because there were no shows, not a single show bar one on any of the days we suggested. We are literally paying for an empty building, and it's costing us £5 million to do it. So why will you not get an auditor in just to have a look and bring some suggestions to the table? We have actually given you a reasonable way of funding it. So we can take it from the unallocated general reserves. So we could use the money from the unallocated general reserves to fund the auditor to come in and tell us how to make money on a business that's costing us a lot of money. Why aren't you open to that suggestion? I don't understand. You would rather keep funding it and keep funding it and keep funding it and keep costing us money, and then God knows where we'll end up with it. You've just got an abject refusal to even help yourselves on this. And you know, you'll decry the finances, I know you will, but they are actually legitimate finances from the senior finance officers, and this is where we're at. So just vote for getting an external auditor in. I cannot see how it's difficult to want your businesses to do better. That's the bottom line of business, is you want to succeed. You're happy to reward failure, but that just about sums it up, really, doesn't it?
Speaker before Councillor Wilson winds up the...
Thank you. Well, I've got the financial figures from the same people that Councillor Wilson made great play in saying he got the great respect for, and he trusts the figures that he's given, etc., etc. At the last cabinet, he praised all our financial people, and I agree with him. We all agreed with him. We trust those people to give us sound advice. Now, I've got the same figures they've got, but what they're not telling you is, if you look at those figures, there's a thing in there that I've said previously that I don't believe, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, okay? A business doesn't have to account for, and that's depreciation of the council assets. Now, that figure has to be added in because it's wooden dollars, we used to call it in the industry. It's actually just an accounting process to show the value of properties that you're running the business or you're running the Civic Hall from. So that has to be put in for accounting purposes. Now, the interesting thing is, if you take that out, because as I said, it's not money that's being moved from one to the other, it's just an accounting process to show the value of those assets. If you take that out, and then you look at those figures, they change considerably. In 1819, made £126 profit. Let's say under budget. In 1718, it come £14,764 under budget. In 1617, it come in £67,126 under budget. In 1516, it was £951 over budget. In 1415, it was £28,899 under budget. And I've lost it on my magic phone for the rest. And it goes back even further, all the way back to 2010. There's two figures in there. I can't remember the figures now because I took them off from me if I was only going to go back 5 years. But there's two figures in there, 109,000 over budget, and another figure back in 2013-14, which was way over budget. Part of the reason for that was there was a flood in the 1 year, so money had to be expended that hadn't been put in to the budget for the refurbishment of parts of the building. There was a lot of damage. There was a fire damage, I think, as well, at about the same time. But it goes all the way back. So, all I'm saying is, if you take that out, and as I say, it is only wooden dollars, it's an accounting process, and that's why it's in there. If you take that out, the Civic Hall, in the last 5 years, except for one period, has come under budget. There's been mention of the closure of the Civic Hall. It's not us on this side that said we're going to close the Civic Hall. They're going to close it for 2 days. Now, yes, you're quite right. There probably isn't shows on those days. There's not so many shows, maybe. I don't believe there was none. I think there was not shows, but I think there was usage on those days. If I remember rightly, on some of those days, we used to have the top half of the facility rented out. So it was in use, it is in use, and all it is over there is spin, spin and spin. We're looking to expand the Civic Hall to take bigger shows. We're looking to move forward with the Civic Hall, and quite frankly, you know, as far as I'm concerned, all they're doing is spinning rubbish.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Wilson, would you like to give your right of reply?
Interesting what Councillor Lloyd says, because actually the figures provided here actually take out depreciation. I see he's not actually in his place to hear the response. But his so-called wooden dollars are actually taken out of these figures, so we haven't double accounted. These have been provided by the officers, and it says, and I quote, direct cost to the taxpayer. In plain English, that means what every other person in this borough is paying towards keeping the Civic Hall open after you have taken into account all the income that we have from the shows and the bar and this, that and the other, is £5,380,019. So it seems that it isn't us who are trying to do false accountancy on this one, or sleight of hand or trickery. It's, to quote Councillor Lloyd, spin. And if any party is the master of spin, the party of Alistair Campbell is certainly the one to do that, although I accept he's now gone Lib Dem now. But he was Labour. Now, it is true. Pardon? If you want to contribute, you can speak when it's public questions. The point of the matter is, the Civic Hall requires improvement and looking at. What are you afraid of? Apart from the fact it might show up some institutional failings that you are directly responsible for.
That is the real issue here. Now, Councillor Condacourt, I completely agree with him. It isn't about saying that the pound and the penny has been spent according to law. It is about saying, are we getting value for money out of what we are spending? Now, we had from Councillor Glass effectively an argument from the 1970s. No one on this side decries people going to the arts and listening to music and this, that and the other. In fact, studies show, and I fully support the studies, that those who study music or listen to music are far more likely to have a grasp on mathematics than those who don't. Perhaps people on the other side should actually start listening to music more than actually refusing to look at the maths. Studies also show that people who perform on stage are probably more likely to have better hand-eye coordination and be better at sporting activities and such like. No one is decrying that on this side. But when I did an in-depth investigation, I think actually only myself and Councillor Jill Shepherd are the ones remaining on the council who did the in-depth Civic Hall review, must be 8 or 9 years ago now. When we went through line by line, the only shows which were making a profit weren't council shows, they were private shows, what people had brought in. That just goes to show that this council does not have the capacity to actually run shows on a commercial basis. I mean, we must be really upset that, apart from the fact that we are obviously upset that Doddy died. I mean, he was one of the last great institutions of the Civic Hall. In fact, I remember seeing him being sat in the front row and actually being rather concerned about who he was going to pick on next, Madam Mayor, because he had a fearsome reputation like that. But what we have to look at with the Civic Hall is it fit for purpose and can it be fit for the future? At the moment, those who are looking after the Civic Hall in political office cannot, if they refuse this motion, say that they are. What we need to do is get someone in who actually knows what they're doing, someone independent, someone external, and go through this place top to bottom. Now, when I put forward the shadow budget, yes, we did look at closing Civic Hall Monday and Tuesday. As Councillor Jackson said, leadership requires making difficult decisions, and that was a difficult decision. But I based that on the advice from officers that those were the days when there was least activity in the Civic Hall, and actually, when we did our research, there was only one show on throughout the entire year's programme on a Monday or Tuesday. We are not putting on the shows which people want to see. In fact, when we went through the show's finances, we paid £5,000 for the Orchestra of the Swan to come in, but we only sold £1,000 worth of tickets. Now, if that is the type of finances that the council will run, no wonder we are not operating properly within financial budgets, because whilst you can accept an element of subsidy, subsidising something to the tune of 75–80%, that is not business sense. It is not sense for us as custodians of the public finances to move forward. And that's what we want to do. Make sure that the Civic Hall can be there for the future, because the way you run it now means that in possibly the next 10 or 20 years, the Civic Hall, worst case scenario, will not be able to run in its current state because we cannot afford it. Whilst other areas of this council are having to make reductions in their services, you have kept the Civic Hall going. It is only fair and right and proper that the council taxpayers know that we are looking at the Civic Hall too. You've ring-fenced it and protected it unfairly to others.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We will now move to the vote on the notice of motion. Okay, we can have a recorded vote. All those in favour of... Pardon? Oh, sorry, yes, of course. Okay.
Indicate for or against the motion. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Brindley Edwards. Councillor Brown, apologies. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane, apologies. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox. Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacourt. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longden, apologies. Councillor Pandair. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J Sargent, Councillor J Shepherd, Councillor T Shepherd, Councillor Smith, Councillor Tandy, Councillor Tromans, Councillor Walmsley, Councillor Watkins, Councillor Wilson.
Is the section 106 contributions. Councillor Wilson, do you want to move this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now that this council has approved the borough plan, this motion is even more important moving forward. We are expecting in the region of 15,000 dwellings to be built in Nuneaton and Bedworth and Bulkington between now and 2031. Indeed, about 4.5, 5, maybe 5,000 have been built already in the St Nicholas and Weddington area. But residents of the borough plan have a right and expectation to know that any 106 contributions, which is effectively the developer's community contribution for offsetting the harm they will cause by their developments to make it acceptable development, they have the right to know that when we approve those planning applications, that the vast majority of those 106 contributions will be spent in the locality where that development is being built. Now, a couple of months ago, I have to say I was absolutely dismayed when I sat on the planning committee that if the planning committee was minded to approve 2 applications in Weddington, one being 775 houses off Caldicot, which fortunately was rejected because of other policy reasons, but it said that if it was be minded to approve, that over £900,000 worth of developer contributions in 106s weren't to be spent in Weddington, weren't even to be spent in St Nicholas, weren't even to be spent in Abbey Ward, which is arguably close, but still wouldn't be right. The council was wanting to spend that money at probably the furthest point in Nuneaton, not the borough, but in Nuneaton, from where the development in Weddington was to occur. They wanted to spend close to £1 million from a development in Weddington on refurbishing and renovating Stockingford Community Centre. Now, Stockingford Community Centre may need redevelopment and bringing up to the 21st century, but it should not do so at the expense of another part of the borough which is seeing significant development and harm caused by the developers building in those areas. And indeed, another application, which fortunately again was refused on policy grounds that night, proposed to spend almost £600,000 on Whittleford Park. Again, you couldn't probably get any further in Nuneaton from the development if you tried. Now, that is wrong, pure and simple. If residents in Weddington take development, the money generated should stay as far as possible in Weddington. Why couldn't Weddington have had a community centre for the £900,000 which was proposed? Why couldn't Weddington have its Weddington Fields and the Weddington Walk redone for the £600,000 which were going to be spent over in Whittleford Park? And as a councillor who has development in my ward, 2 developments in Whitestone, I know Bulkington also has the same fears. If, when it comes to 106s, the recommendations from officers are to put them as far away as possible from the area which is seeing development, that is wrong. So this motion is designed to send a message both to you as the controlling group and as a policy statement to our officers. If you have the development, you get the benefits of the development too, and the money stays as far as possible with that development. That is fair, and that is right, and that is what we as councillors should be saying. I am sure residents in Bedworth would be equally dismayed if they, in their areas, when they take development imposed on them by this council, if their money was diverted somewhere in Nuneaton. I would be equally as angry for them too. If Bulkington money is spent somewhere over in Camp Hill, that is not fair either. If you want the money to refurbish something in your ward or develop something in your ward, then you should take the development that goes with it and not pay for it at the expense and misery of hard-working and decent members of our communities who are having to put up with the development. So if you have the principles you claim to have, and that you believe in equality for residents, and that you believe that residents should see the benefits of the development as well as the downsides, vote for this motion tonight, send a clear signal, we stand behind our residents, and that the money stays where the greatest harm is done. Vote for this motion, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Phillips.
And no doubt people will let's speak to the motion. There is a general presumption, right? I am for the life of me how those two planning applications designated 106 money to those areas where it wasn't being developed, although the applications were refused. One thing I would say is generally 106 monies is spent in the areas where the development is being built. I have no problem with that. They need schools, they need doctors' surgeries, they might need a community centre. You know, the general rule is that the majority of that money is spent where the development is taking place. We have no problem with that at all. It's been the case. Sometimes, though, some of that money, right, might need to go to destination parks. There might be areas in the borough where there's no development taking place, like maybe at Galley Common, which is where Whittleford might have come up. Yeah, but there is no development in certain areas. There's very little development in my ward, for example. The last biggest development in my ward was the Borough ground. And the 106 money from that, I thought, great. That would be really good. But I'd kept 50,000 towards the ward to be spent on leisure and a new play park. That was it. The other 25,000 went to a central pot. And the other 25,000 was kept on one side, put in the budget for long-term maintenance. So that's sometimes how 106 money is spent. You know, but we on this side have no qualms about the general presumption that 106 monies goes where the development is. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you for calling me to speak, Madam Mayor. In 2014, Bedworth Labour councillors lied to my residents who saved the woodlands, but despite that pledge, they went on to include the Bedworth woodlands as a strategic site in the borough plan, and just a few months ago, Bedworth...
I'll call your point of order after Councillor Evans has finished.
That's very kind, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I am speaking to the motion because and Madam Mayor, with respect, your microphone is still on.
Sorry.
So, with regards to this motion, you cannot speak about Section 106 contributions without talking about the borough plan or planning applications. You just can't do it. And despite the the pledge from Bedworth Labour councillors, they voted it through in the borough plan just some months ago. But the job of myself and Councillor Gran now is to protect as much of the woodlands as possible. And I think the campaign from the Woodlands Action Group has been incredibly successful in reducing the allocation of dwellings. In 2016 it was 1,600. It's now gone down to 689, and it's likely it could go down to 189. But I will do whatever I can to mitigate the impacts of the development on the woodlands. And I want to make it absolutely crystal clear that any Section 106 contributions we get from the woodlands have to be spent in Bedworth and not Nuneaton. The money has to go towards more GP provision in the town, and the money has to go to the local schools like Cannon Maggs and Nuneaton Primary School. And I've been dismayed by some of the examples of where Section 106
contributions have been spent to the borough. We've just heard the example from Councillor Wilson about contributions from Weddington going over to Stockingford, for example. And that's why I'll fight tooth and nail for any 106 monies from developments on the woodlands, that they have to go and be spent in Bedworth. And we've already had problems so far with the borough plan and section 106 contributions with regards to the Gypsy Lane development, just because we forgot to include one line, one brief line I would add, in the borough plan strategic site provision column, to ask for additional sport and leisure provision, which means we could potentially go on to lose £2.3 million, because we made that simple mistake. And that's why we need to have an immediate review of the borough plan right now, tomorrow morning, so that we can iron out those mistakes, so we don't lose any more money from the borough plan. In closing my statement, and thank you for allowing me to carry on speaking, Councillor Tandy, perhaps the portfolio holder for planning and development, Councillor Phillips, may wish to come into this debate when he gets the opportunity to close up, to give us, as councillors, a date for when that immediate review will start. Just saying,
discussing the borough plan or anything to do with it. We are discussing the notice of motion, reference section 106 contributions. Could you keep to the subject, please?
But as I said, contributions without talking about the borough plan.
Well, you to speak about 106 contributions and not a discussion on the borough plan. Thank you.
Speaking, the portfolio holder may wish to conclaim about a date for when the immediate review will commence. Just saying, oh, it's going to happen soon. Does that mean in 20 years' time? Does it mean tomorrow morning?
Trying to discuss the borough plan rather than the item under discussion, I will ask you to sit down and will not allow you to continue to speak.
I have come to the end of my statements, but I will be making a number of observations for the future motion in a few hours' time about your standards at this meeting.
No, forget it.
I think it's worth, given what Councillor Phillips has said and what the leader has said previously, and Councillor Harvey, the previous leader before that, all the reassurances have been heard. Press, public, people must be wondering, why on earth are we having this debate about 106? You were very clear, and I appreciate that. You know, fundamentally, time and time again, we look to spend the section 106 properly and where it was raised and all the rest of it. So people must be wondering, why are we having this motion? Why are we putting it forward? But like all the other things tonight, and the theme here is very clear, the fact is what the controlling group have said for years has not happened. There has been no town centre regeneration or meaningful one. And when they promise that it's happening, it doesn't. And you can keep saying it is, but it doesn't happen. And so we put forward a motion to try and drive that forward. Keep saying that the civic hall is going to be sorted out. It isn't. Still keeps costing us money.
And you as well, that the civic hall.
Theme and the reason why we've put forward this 106 motion is because despite the protestations of the controlling group, it doesn't happen. I don't think there's any other way of saying it. Whatever you guys have said, you and your predecessors, it hasn't happened. And we've just heard from Councillor Wilson how the latest, it's outrageous. They're outrageous. The Section 106 couldn't have gone any further away in the town than what was planned for. And there's a fundamental kind of dishonesty in a way about the way 106 is portrayed when things like that happen. It really undermines the public confidence and trust that even when it's spent in the ward or the nearby ward, it's done in a way that members of the public aren't really told about. The full extent isn't explained. And I'll give you a good example of 106 that's gone awry. There's 106 money where they've said to a developer, I tell you what, if this goes through, we'll want to charge you 106 for biodiversity offsetting. Well, we would all agree with that. And you expect that to be taken seriously, especially when it's a serious amount of money involved. And you're expecting nature reserves or something like that. And we appreciate that biodiversity offsetting is the one thing that maybe you can't actually do in ward. You can't, in the middle of Abbey, knock down houses and do a frog pond or whatever. You probably can't do that in the middle of built-up St Nicholas or whatever. But what we had was things like, actually, our biodiversity offsetting, but don't tell the public, is we just won't cut the grass on parts of the play park, rendering the play park useless for its purpose. Great job if you can get it. You save on grounds maintenance. Oh yeah, but hold on, you've already got a contract. So all you've done is save Glendale some money. And there's no more biodiversity, because what happens on play parks? What do the SNT, the Safer Neighbourhoods police teams, tell us when Section 106 money isn't used properly and to keep play parks? When you have all the long uncut grass, antisocial behaviour, dog fowl, animals for biodiversity.
Councillor Tromans.
Section 106
Councillor
biodiversity.
Tromans, please stay with the item under discussion.
Yeah. So,
106 agreements, which is the item. Please.
Is biodiversity, and again, there's sleight of hand there. So all of this has undermined public confidence. And you have been in control of the borough now for so many years. If people have lost confidence to the point where we are having to bring forward motion after motion after motion to try and hold you to your words, because the words from you and your successors don't tally with the events on the ground. So I'm sure we'll get a reassurance again that we'll try and spend Section 106 in the area it's raised. And I understand the point about small amounts may be diverted from multiple different 106 pots to make a reasonable amount of money to help with destination parks. At the margin, yeah, people get that. But not wholesale £1 million here, 3 million there, whatever. And then when money is collected in, it's not even used to help the borough and do proper biodiversity offsetting. You guys have got to walk the walk, because no one believes your talk anymore.
All of whom will be saying something very similar. I have no intention of adding to the list any further, and I would ask you please to keep your speeches as short as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The motion that's in front of us, there's actually no need for it to be here tonight. It's already the case that we do it. So I'm happy to vote yes to the motion, but I'm mystified by some of the logic that's been put forward. Councillor Wilson mentioned about equality. He also spoke about let the areas take the development to pay for in those wards. Well, Madam Mayor, that isn't always possible. That can't always be possible. Councillor Evans stood up as he usually does and seems to be not speaking to his colleagues, because he would, if he did, he would know through his colleagues on the planning committee that the Gypsy Lane development did not lose any money. The developers agreed to pay the necessary contributions. Madam Mayor, it would also be illegal for us to misuse any planning contributions which was suggested. And I'd ask, are there any examples that we've ever done that? I'm not aware that any developer has ever challenged us on the use of the contributions requested. And Madam Mayor, I have to say, any move to a stricter, more locally based 106 contribution could lead unnecessarily to unnecessary provision in, I guess, what would be mostly Tory wards. Madam Mayor, the more deprived, needy wards, such as Bede Ward and Abbey Ward, would lose out, as they don't have the land to be developed. They wouldn't necessarily get those contributions unless they were mitigated for by some other development. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
I shouldn't have been surprised to hear another attack on Stockingford Community Centre, but I'd just like to explain how Stockingford Community Centre serves the whole community, including Weddington, especially since the Tories shut down the children's centres. Families from Weddington travel to Stockingford Community Centre because they are having to put on those services there. There is nowhere else. They were supposed to be opening the Abbey Children's Centre. He's moaning at the community centre. I'm not on planning, so I'm not aware that that's happening, but I will be looking into it. Understand how Stockingford Community Centre, yes, it serves the local deprived community. From Weddington, Whitestone, who have children who need CAM services, who have nowhere to go, travel to Stockingford Community Centre because that is where they are having to put those on. Aspiring Arts happens at Stockingford Community.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, would you like to continue, please?
£106 money, wherever it is spent, serves the whole community. I'm fed up of this divide and conquer that keeps happening tonight. There's no need for it.
Councillor Evans.
During my statement to Council on this motion, you interrupted me on several occasions telling me to stick to the motion.
I also interrupted
right at the start of this debate, we had the comment that we're having 15,000 houses built up to 2031, between now and 2031. The borough plan was for 15,000 from 2011, so they've already built 3,000, and it's very unlikely that all the rest will get built because we're building 600 a year, not the large amounts. But where they are built, the Section 106 money is really important. And one of the problems we've had with spending Section 106 money in the local locations is having the infrastructure money, infrastructure list costed out so that when a development in a place happens, the planning officers can say that now we need to spend X thousand on a community centre or a cycle lane, whatever. You have to cost out all the things you need in Weddington or Gypsy Lane or wherever, so that the planners can actually assign spending to local things. If things haven't been costed, the planners say we can't ask for money for that for Section 106 because it hasn't been costed, which is why we get some stupid requests a long way away. So we do need as the council and the county council, I'm a county councillor, the county council needs to cost out, and also the health service, cost out more stuff so that we can ask for it. And the really big example of a Section 106 we need to ask for locally in Weddington is an entrance on the railway station. And that hasn't been costed. So all the applications in Weddington with a Section 106 requests haven't been able to ask for contribution towards a railway station entrance. And the same thing is going to happen with all these other developments around the borough. If we haven't done the work, and the county council hasn't done the work, and the NHS hasn't done the work on costing the GP surgeries and the infrastructure, our Section 106 monies do not go to the right places. So it's a systematic failure. The borough leads the process, so should be kicking the other authorities and the departments within the borough to get a good list of infrastructure. And we need, as councillors, to be more involved in where the Section 106 happens. Sometimes planning officers discuss with us. I know Councillor Hancock has had some good success with the small-scale developments in Bedworth, from where the old shop was. You know, they spent. I forgot the name of it, but yeah. There's been small developments where the Section 106 money has been spent well, but it takes a lot of time, and we need more planning officers to spend more time with councillors, and we need other agencies to cost stuff up, because there's a massive problem, and we're losing money. The final thing I just want to say is, it's no good having these Section 106 requests if the trigger points are wrong and all the infrastructures, all the planning form's wrong. Because developments will go slowly. If you've got two developments funding one thing, then what happens if only one of the developments happen? The whole thing's a total mess. And the government needs to sort out Section 106 as well for places like Nuneaton, where community infrastructure levy is very difficult to get in due to the viability. So we're stuck with Section 106 and the system is broken.
Councillor Llewellyn-Nash.
Thank you. Will be particularly heavily impacted by future plans, Bedworth Woodlands and the Bowling Green and Hospital Lane. If the council are really serious about these developments, they should be willing to minimise the impact for local residents. So things like the Section 106 monies should be spent in, say, Bedworth Heath area or the next ward, and not, for example, Nuneaton. We need investments in parks such as playing fields behind the Newdigate Colliery and schools like Newdigate Primary, where I'm a governor. I will be voting in favour of this motion tonight because I believe in the view that Section 106 contributions are spent within the locality and not possibly 10 miles away somewhere else.
Councillor Golby.
I'm glad that there's an agreement on this. So, just to be clear, it says in the motion that we've submitted, the council believes there should be a general assumption in favour of Section 106 contributions being spent within the locality where the development that has generated such funding has taken place. So, the presumption is in favour of the area first, so that's what we're asking for, and I'm really glad that you've agreed that. I really am. It dismays me a little bit because a couple of days ago you were door knocking in my patch and shoving letters through people's doors, and one of the claims you were making were Labour aims to bring £20 million for sporting facilities. Now I know that £5 million of that is coming out of my patch and going to Bedworth. So where's the assumption there? This is on your leaflets that you're putting out. The money is costed actually in the borough plan. So it's there for everyone to see. I don't mind people getting money, but I'd like that £5 million spending in my area first, if that's okay. It's here. It's the Labour Rose leaflet that you're going round. It wouldn't surprise me actually if you stood somebody in May against me who is from Bedworth just to try and secure your investment should they be elected. I'm waiting for that one to happen. So, yeah, it's not about not sharing the love or not spreading the wealth from one area that's getting development to another area that might not because there's no room to develop, for example, in Abbey. I get that, but what we're asking for is that you don't move the money around until you've done everything you possibly can in the area that's generated it, and that's not the intention. That isn't what your intentions are. It's clear it's not because you're posting leaflets through people's door telling them otherwise. Again, I'll refer to my own patch and the money, the contributions that are earmarked in the borough plan as financial contributions to offset the development that is, that has been generated. And again, no problem. My kids go to their swimming lessons every week at Bedworth. So it's not like we don't use the facilities. However, I just think that it would be nice for my residents to get a little bit of a look in before you go signing off the cheque and allocating it somewhere else. I was not included. I have spoken to planning. I've spoken to the head of planning, and it's actually quite feasible for me to go in and discuss Section 106 monies, but whether that gets the sign-off from the ruling group is another question. So I'm more than happy to go and make the case for my residents and where we would like the money spending. And I would expect that it's not a political decision that overrules it because you've already committed £5 million or £20 million on your political leaflets, because it's not a council leaflet that you're pushing through, it's a political one.
Councillor Andy Sargent.
I mean, I think if we're talking about a general assumption, that's fine. you know, my concern would be that there's other things in the borough. So, you know, Councillor Golby talked about our children going to Bedworth to have swimming lessons. You know, it is difficult because there's no, in certain areas, there's no development. So I'd be a little bit concerned of how that general assumption works and whether the motion should have a bit more detail in it, really, to how that, you know, because I can't see what the general assumption would be. Where's that level of assumption that where that money would go? Do you see what I mean? No. Okay. So I'm a bit torn, really, with the motion, and what's actually meant by general assumption.
Councillor Guttridge.
Mayor, I represent the Whitestone ward. We don't have a football pitch. We don't have a school. We'd like a football pitch. We'd like a school. But we're going to have nearly 1,000 houses which the residents do not want. The roads will not take it. I have at the moment a nature reserve which I'm trying to get generated, revamped up. Still can't get it. I'm trying to get the school, some playground equipment uprated. We still can't get it. But with the 106 money, if it stays in our ward, I will be able to do those projects. And following on from the portfolio holder for planning, Mr. Phillips, I will hold you to task that my 106 money that my residents are having to suffer will be spent in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one final speaker, but it doesn't seem to be in the chamber at the moment, so we will move to wind up the debate. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll address Councillor Andy Sargent's point first, if I may. There is, and Councillor Golby quite rightly referred to Bedworth swimming baths, but there is development going on in Bedworth. So, Madam Mayor, I believe your microphone is still on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That any development within Bedworth Civic Hall, when it comes to play facilities and such like, they should have first dibs on that funding. It is within the locality of Bedworth. People from those sites that will have the development will, in all probability, use the Bedworth swimming baths. That is an appropriate use of those 106 fundings. What isn't an appropriate use, in my view, is actually cutting a line artificially through a ward, which is what has happened in Arbury, if you look at the borough plan documents, and saying, arbitrarily, this section goes to Nuneaton, but this sliver here goes into Bedworth so that we can move that funding into Bedworth. That's not fair. Now, if you're going to talk about a borough-wide swimming facility located somewhere centrally, hypothetically, there might be a case for that. But at the moment we have two separate facilities, quite rightly needed, but they should be funded through their local developments which are going on. Now, I'm pleased that Councillor Phillips has actually said he agrees in principle, and I hope he will go and speak to officers about this particular case, because when I saw that on planning, to say that my blood was raised is quite an understatement, because my view is that, and the view on these benches is, if you take the development which has been imposed on you, you should get first dibs on the money from that site. Now, I'm pleased Councillor Phillips agrees, but it would appear 2 seats down from him, the message hasn't gotten through. Now, I didn't see individual councillors in Stockingford, and I am, to save you looking around, Councillor Phillips, it's Councillor Elliott. It's fine, it's the hour. If you wanted funding for Stockingford Community Centre, which I agree it may be needed, I'm not disputing that, but then lobby to have development in your area to take it. I didn't see anyone from Stockingford lobbying to have development in the Kingswood, Barpool, conurbation around there. If you wanted it, go and lobby for it. But if you are imposing it on other people, don't try and take the money away from those areas that are taking it. That's principally unfair. It's not quite earthquake money, I know, but the pot of money isn't infinite, and it should be spent in the areas that are most affected. with a general assumption, 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 is that there should effectively be a hierarchy. I accept Councillor Phillips when he says that there may be cases like Riversley Park, like the Miners' Welfare Park, where of course you're not going to build on Riversley Park, not unless you want to sign a political suicide letter. But it is necessary to say everyone from around the borough enjoys these benefits, so they can have some. That's right and appropriate. But to then divert money, like in the instance I gave about the development near Caldicot for 775 houses, that is plainly unfair. No one is seeking to divide and conquer. What we are seeking is an element of fairness. If you have voted it through that my areas and other areas must have it, then you must accept the necessary flip side of the coin, where we should have the funding spent in our areas first. That's what the residents expect. If you don't like it, use the borough plan opportunity to review it, to take areas out of my area from development. I'm sure my residents will be happy, and you can have the development in yours. And if that means you get Stockingford refurbished, all power to you. I don't mind. There is. Sites were put forward.
Councillor Wilson has...
If you actually read the call for sites document, then there were in the wider Stockingford area sites which were put forward. Indeed, I believe they were put forward by Arbury Estates, if I remember rightly. So, if you believe in this motion, you've said you do, vote for it. It's in Kingswood, Stockingford.
Councillor Jackson, your notice of motion.
Madam Mayor, I rise again to talk about the issue of respect in the council chamber. There has been shouting needful. I am frankly putting the message across to the opposition that shouting at us as the Labour controlling group, that calling me on numerous occasions like Robert Mugabe, telling female councillors to grow a pair in this chamber is frankly totally unacceptable behaviour.
Carry on.
In the heat of debate, sometimes people raise their voices. Indeed, people on your own side have done that. So if you're going to hold me to the same standard, look on your own benches first, Councillor Jackson. Secondly, I have never, ever referred to you as Robert Mugabe. I said that the former leader was in power as long as Robert Mugabe. There's a world of difference between personality. So perhaps you ought to retract that statement, Councillor Jackson, because it is a lie.
I have absolutely no intention of sitting here while there are arguments going from one member to another across the floor. There is if someone wants to make a complaint, there is a complaints procedure to be followed. So I will now, Councillor Elliott, did you wish to...
Personal explanation for £1 million to be spent at Stockingford Community Centre, and I said I will look into see what your point is. I have not lobbied for that.
I accept what Councillor Wilson has said about the previous leader being like reigning as long as the leader of Zimbabwe and other such comments. But there have been some inappropriate comments made today, and I would expect that, you know, you would give them a little bit of thought, Madam Mayor.
Therefore, we now move to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal, please show. That seems to be unanimous. And anyone against?